Chapter 1491. Chen Hao's eyes widened as he stared blankly. Had Chen Hao never seen a beauty before? He had, and which one of his companions wasn't a stunning beauty? But at this moment, seeing Yang Luyan for the first time really made Chen Hao stare blankly. What kind of concept was that? If it was the Chen Hao of the Eastern continent when he first met Helian Wuzi, Xia Yuyu, Chen Hao, and the others, it was understandable that he stared blankly. After all, at that time, Chen Hao didn't have much experience. But now, after experiencing all these women and seeing the world, he actually stared blankly at Yang Luyan. Then what kind of beauty was Yang Luyan? Ha! Yang Luyan stretched out her left thumb and index finger to hold her chin. She still slightly raised her chin and said proudly, "What do you think? Am I beautiful?" Cough cough, beautiful? I knew that the vague appearance you showed me in the immortal world was fake, but I didn't expect it to be fake to this extent. Chen Hao coughed awkwardly and said hurriedly. Needless to say, Yang Luyan was absolutely extremely beautiful. But the thing that truly caused Chen Hao to be stunned was Yang Luoyan's bearing. It was a type of beauty that was contradictory to the extreme, yet seemed to be completely natural. When he first looked at it, it was dignified and peerlessly pure, yet when he looked at it again, it was naive, pure, and lively. It caused others to have the feeling of prostrating themselves in worship, yet it also caused others to feel tender affection and doting towards her. Hee, you're also very handsome, just a little bit worse than my father. Yang Luyan didn't have the slightest distance, as if she and Chen Hao had been friends for many years. She naturally leaned against a huge rock beside her and said with a smile. Chen Hao stared. Was this a compliment to him or to her father? What Chen Hao didn't know was that if people who were familiar with Yang Luyan, or Yang Luoyan's father, knew that Yang Luyan said so about Chen Hao, they would definitely be extremely shocked. This was absolutely a super high evaluation that had never been seen since ancient times. One must know that even in the face of so many incomparably outstanding younger brothers, she only had one evaluation, barely passable. Compared to her father, he was just dung grass. So, don't tell me you're embarrassed? Seeing that Chen Hao was still in a daze, Yang Luyan teased. How could that be? You're not affected by the immortal boundary stone? Everyone would be affected. It's just that my cultivation level is much higher than yours, so my situation is better than yours. May I ask what realm are you at? Chen Hao asked. In Chen Hao's opinion, since Yang Luyan could control the space of the immortal world, she must be in existence above the immortal emperor realm. After all, the Empyrean heavenly stairway was the end of the immortal world. You're taller than anyone you know. This is for you. Yang Luyan smiled and suddenly took out a guanine jade pendant and handed it to Chen Hao, changing the topic. It looked like an extremely ordinary jade pendant. And Chen Hao did not have any perception ability at the moment, so what kind of aura the jade pendant emitted was not something that the current Chen Hao could sense. However, Chen Hao did not think that Yang Luyan would give him an ordinary jade pendant. This is... My mother made it. To me, it's a protective talisman. To you, it's just an ordinary jade pendant. However, with it, when the immortal boundary stone is activated, you can choose the world I want to go to based on its aura. What do you think? Interested? Yang Luyan stared at Chen Hao and asked. Chen Hao paused for a moment, then shook his head. I knew you wouldn't go now. I was just joking. In fact, you can't go now. Keep it. If you can step out of this galaxy in the future, remember to activate it. All right, the immortal boundary stone is about to activate, I hope. Yang Luyan looked at Chen Hao and paused for a moment, then said, We'll meet again one day. Good thing you're still working hard. Whoosh. It was also at this moment that Chen Hao suddenly felt the ground beneath him start to shake. Immediately, the immortal boundary stone, which seemed to have been shielded from the spatial storm, suddenly started to blow downwards. It was a downwards wind caused by the absorption of spatial energy from the ground. Chen Hao, who had lost all of his god power, was instantly plastered to the ground. Moreover, the suction force became stronger and stronger in an instant. Yang Luoyan's situation was not much different from Chen Hao's. She was also sucked to the ground. Chen Hao, the painful journey is about to begin. With your endurance, it shouldn't be a problem. You said that Nguyen Lan might be sucked here too? Based on the speed of a cultivator in the Grand Mist Supremacy realm, the immortal boundary stone can absorb a distance of at least 20,000 years without stopping. You found this place. Although you didn't find Nguyen Lan, she should still be in this space, right? If nothing unexpected happens, she'll also be sucked here by the immortal boundary stone. However, it's hard to say whether she can withstand it. Even if she can, it's hard to say whether you'll meet her. However, there should be a high chance. After all, she's looking for you, right? It's activated. Are we just going to be sucked in like this? The suction force is getting stronger and stronger? As more energy is absorbed, the suction force will become stronger and stronger. When it's satisfied, we'll begin to teleport. If we can't withstand it before the teleportation begins, there's nothing we can do. Whoosh! As Yang Lian spoke, the wind became even more terrifying. Chen Hao felt like he was being squashed. However, his strong physical body didn't feel much. Where do you plan to teleport to? Ancient chaos, Chen Hao said directly. Yang Liuyan's introduction of the immortal boundary stone made Chen Hao understand that this was undoubtedly the best opportunity to return to Earth. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to return to Earth. However, if he went back, the chances of him coming back would be equally slim. Therefore, he had no choice. Ancient chaos needed him. Although he could still control it now, what about after a while? Why not choose Earth? That's your origin. You learned about the mysteries of Earth in the immortal realm. If you go back, it'll be more suitable for your enlightenment and growth. Moreover, spirits of all things are born and awakened on Earth. You won't lack opponents. I also want to go back. That's my origin. However, ancient chaos is already my root. Right now, ancient chaos needs me even more. Chen Hao said. Earth also needs you. All right, up to you. Actually, I just want to tell you that Earth is better for your growth. Since you've decided, it's up to you. Bush, 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 bang, rumble. As the suction force soared, the surrounding star fragments and spatial energy transformed into a terrifying spatial storm that surged towards the immortal boundary stone. Although Chen Hao had lost his divine ability and strength, his abnormal physical strength didn't affect him. Yang Liuyan also didn't feel anything. However, the two of them were quickly submerged by the huge stone and energy that was devouring them. Chapter 1492. As time went by, the pressure on Chen Hao became greater and greater. The terrifying energy, like a surging tide, began to crazily extract the energy in Chen Hao's body. This made Chen Hao slightly surprised. Fortunately, it didn't take long before Chen Hao felt his body lighten. Goodbye! Almost at the same time, Yang Liuyan's voice sounded in Chen Hao's mind. Take care. Chen Hao knew that this should be Yang Liuyan's last farewell. Although he couldn't say it out loud, Chen Hao still said it in his mind. Immediately, Chen Hao stepped into a new space. His perception, strength, magic, and so on were all restored. Unfortunately, Yang Liuyan was no longer by his side. At this moment, he seemed to be in a vast and boundless night sky. Countless stars were blooming brightly. Some were big, some were small, some were far, and some were near. It was like a fairy tale world, beautiful and fantastical. But what attracted Chen Hao's attention was the colorful light belts that led to infinity with him as the core. Each of the 7 colored ribbons contained a completely different aura, but most of them were unfamiliar to Chen Hao. How can there be so many? Among them, Chen Hao could clearly tell from the aura contained in the 5 colorful light belts that they corresponded to the Earth, the vast thousand worlds of ancient chaos, the vast thousand worlds of immortal emperors, the vast thousand worlds of chaos, and the Milky Way star zone, which was also the vast thousand worlds of Milky Way. According to Yang Liuyan, Chen Hao only needed to step into the corresponding aura of whichever world he wanted to go to, but what was going on with those worlds that were completely unfamiliar to Chen Hao? Could it be that my origin contains the aura of so many worlds? Does this mean that I have been to so many worlds? Chen Hao was really surprised. There were at least 8 or 9,000 rainbow-colored light ribbons in front of him. If there weren't 10,000 of them, then there would be at least 8 or 9,000 of them. If there was one every day, then it would lead to a world that Chen Hao had been to before. Only a world that he had been to would have its aura. But how could Chen Hao have been to so many places? It's impossible for the current me to have been there. That's the world that my past self, the world that I've experienced through hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of reincarnations? It must be. Then what kind of existence am I? Chen Hao was a little shocked by his past self. He was also a little confused and fearful. He had always insisted on being himself in this life. Even though he no longer rejected the inheritance of absolute arts and was prepared to fully awaken, he was still a little worried when he saw his complicated self at this moment. While Chen Hao was still immersed in shock, he suddenly felt a pulling force. Is it about to begin? It seems like we can only stay here for a limited time. Chen Hao glanced at the aura from the earth and resisted the urge to go back. He stepped into the colorful light belt that returned to ancient chaos. Buzz. The moment he stepped in, all of Chen Hao's senses suddenly disappeared again. There was only light left in his eyes. 7-colored light, rotating light. It seemed like it was only an instant before all of his senses reappeared. To Chen Hao's surprise, he had returned to the void of the ancient chaos boundless world. The Divine Palace? Sensing the aura below him, Chen Hao discovered that he had been directly teleported to the second heaven above the Divine Palace. The Divine Palace. The Divine Palace after the unification of the 10 major galaxies. In the core square of the Divine Palace stood a huge statue. It was Chen Hao himself. What Chen Hao did not expect was that at this moment, the core square was crowded with countless cultivators. The people of the 10 major galaxies were still divided into 10 major areas. Except for the tens of thousands of cutting Dao true immortals, almost all of them were cultivators of the Daluo Jingxian and the Grand Mist Supremacy realm. This is the genius that Ao Tian was talking about? He can't even withstand a single blow. At best, he's below average in our Destroyer of Heavens. Yes, I knew it. The tyrants must be the strongest. Why should we let the humans lead us? The competition has just begun. It's not certain who will win or lose. This time, the insectoids must be first. TSK you lot? Didn't you just awaken a dozen or so spirits of all creation? You'll be surprised later. You'll know that the only ones who can truly unify the ancient chaos is us, the Protoss. Is that so? Do you think the heavenly demons are pushovers? Voices drifted clearly into Chen Hao's ears. Even though Chen Hao was at the second heaven, it could not stop Chen Hao's abnormal senses. Looking down from afar, Chen Hao's expression did not change at all. From Xi Xian, he already knew what was happening at this moment. He had thought that he would not be able to make it in time no matter what, but he did not expect to encounter the immortal realm stone that only appears once in 100 million years. TSK. Streams of light drifted past. Chen Shui, Helian Wuzi, Xi Xian, Shenan, Pan Long, Du Jing, and the others appeared one by one beside Chen Hao. Are we really here? What happened just now? We suddenly lost our senses of the outside world. Fortunately, your mind world remained calm and let us know that you're fine. Chen Shui said. That's too fast. We can feel the space-time laws of more than 30,000 times inside. It doesn't feel like much time has passed. Boss, what happened just now? Everyone asked in surprise. Chen Hao did not seal their senses of the outside world, but when they encountered the immortal realm stone, their senses were completely isolated and sealed in Chen Hao's mind world. Even with the abnormal space-time laws, they did not feel that much time had passed. However, their aura had already reached the void of the ancient chaos vast thousand domains. However, their senses were not as abnormal as Chen Hao's. They could not pass through the barrier of the second heaven and sense their specific location. Naturally, they could not capture what was happening in the temple. The only thing they could be sure of was that they had already arrived in the ancient chaos vast thousand domains. We encountered the legendary, Chen Hao said. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, he realized that the immortal realm stone did not exist in the legends. He hurriedly said, "The legendary miracle has miraculously teleported us back. See, The control contest that Master Yilan mentioned seems to have just begun. How do you know? Si Xian was surprised and asked. We're above the second heaven above the temple. I can sense it. That's great. Master has already prepared to give up his position temporarily. Since we're back, there should be no problem. How? Let's hurry over. Si Xian said excitedly. No hurry. There's plenty of time. Chen Hao smiled and the space between his eyebrows flashed again. Miao Xian, Ning Jing, Qing Yang, Wan Yishui, Shui Fian, Ao Qian, Ling Feng, Ruolin, Ruoxian, and the others who had never been to the ancient chaos vast thousand domains stepped out of Chen Hao's mind world one by one. Chapter 1493. Miao Xian and the others were slightly surprised as they sensed the Tao law that filled the world. They could feel that although the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was not as abundant as that of the great world of Xiandi, the Tao law that filled the world seemed to be stronger than that of the great world of Xiandi. How is it? Chen Hao smiled and looked at Ruoxian and Ruolan. The two of them were infinitely close to the true immortal king realm. They only lacked some kind of opportunity. Therefore, there was no doubt that their perception was more accurate. I didn't expect the Tao law of heaven and earth of ancient chaos to be so strong. I feel that even the great world of Xiandi is inferior to it. Immortal, God, demon. These are the three most powerful auras. The great world of Xiandi is only dominated by the immortal Tao. Ruolan and Ruoxian said, Why did you go to the great world of Xiandi when you were in such a powerful world? Qing Yang asked. In the past, when the 10 galaxies were independent, they were not so powerful. When the 10 galaxies were united and the qi of ancient chaos was connected, the complete Tao of heaven and earth began to be born. Otherwise, ancient chaos could not be compared to the immortal emperor in terms of luck and spiritual qi of heaven and earth. It would not be able to catch up in a short time. However, that does not mean much to us. The supreme Tao of heaven is the key. Chen Hao smiled and said, When I step into the Hongmeng domain, you can cultivate on your own. There are not many experts who can train you, but there are many places where you can train. After ancient chaos was united, many planets, forbidden lands, and ruins revealed clues. There is also the most powerful ancient chaos domain, which is mysterious and terrifying. Ruolan and I are suitable? Ruoxian could not help but ask when she saw Chen Hao looking at her. According to the information gathered from the crowd before, she and Ruolan could be said to be near invincible existences in ancient chaos. Perhaps the only one who could contend against them was Yilan, who once looked down on the immortal emperor's boundless thousand world and stood above the Star River King. After all, Yilan had been imprisoned for so many years. Therefore, before coming to ancient chaos, they felt that the greater thousand realms of ancient chaos held no attraction for them. They had only come here because of Chen Hao and Chen Hao's lesser immortal realm. But now, the highest heavenly Tao of ancient chaos had given them a pleasant surprise. But that was probably the highest heavenly Tao. The ancient chaos desolation region is the area where the great war of the immortals, gods, and devils took place. Of course, it is also the core area of the ancient chaos. It has a total of 10 layers. The first layer is the weakest, and the 10th layer is the strongest. Before I went to the great world of Xiandi, I went there to train for 1,000 years, but I stopped at the second layer. The second level already has the divine sense of a true immortal king. I don't know how strong the later levels are, but I'm sure you'll be satisfied, right? Chen Hao said. Chen Hao's words shocked Ruoxian and Ruolan. Ancient chaos was much more mysterious and powerful than they had expected. Brother, when you go to the Hongmeng region, we also want to go to the ancient chaos region. Chen Nen said. But let's solve the problem of Master Yilan first. Let's go, everyone come in first. Chen Hao once again brought everyone into the space in his mind. His figure flashed, and in a short while, he arrived at the top of the sacred palace from the second heaven. Xiaofeng? When Chen Hao quietly appeared in the sky above the sacred palace's core square, the others, whose senses were not blocked, immediately cried out in surprise in Chen Hao's mind. Then, they all looked at Si Xian, who was beside them. It's Xiaofeng. Sister Si Xian, look, he's almost exactly the same as you. It's just that his aura is a bit weaker, and his temperament is completely different. Qin Yan and the others said. Xiao Feng, he doesn't seem to be as strong as me now, right? Ahem, sister-in-law Si Xian, I'm not talking about you. Lan Feng hugged his Dao partner Xuelan's waist and said smugly. However, when he saw Si Xian's gaze, he immediately shrunk his neck. Everyone laughed, and they all thought of Lan Feng's embarrassing incident. Now, it seemed that Lan Feng had truly let it go since he could say such words in public. Si Xian, is this your third anima? Ruo Xian's eyes lit up. Very good, her state of mind isn't any worse than yours. Her foundation is also very good. Moreover, I can feel that she's almost completely independent. The effects of your fusion will be very good, perhaps. Si Xian smiled faintly. She didn't have the pain that Ruo Xian and Qin Hao had. Her fusion with Xiao Feng was imperative, and there wouldn't be any flaws in her state of mind. This was because Xiao Feng had truly grown up step by step, and was an existence that was completely equal to her. After the fusion, neither of them would disappear, and neither of them would affect the other. The only difference was Qin Hao. Now, because of Si Xian's transformation, it was completely gone. The situation doesn't look good. Every camp has an extremely powerful aura. Aside from Hao, even we can't contend against them. Chen Shui said with a frown. If it's just combat strength, then it's fine. We're not necessarily weak. However, once they activate the power of their godheads, we won't be able to contend against them. Qin Yang said. Miao Xian and Ning Jing also nodded. The previous ranking competition of the great world of Xiandi was the best proof. Even the weakest soul of all things, Wei Wufa, wasn't someone they could contend against when he activated his godhead. This was an innate gap that couldn't be bridged. Of course, this didn't represent potential and future. The soul of all things was merely borrowing the power of his godhead from his previous life. The power that didn't belong to him now was also considered an external force. In the original 10 galaxies of the ancient chaos boundless world, reincarnated soul of all things had emerged in recent years. Each galaxy had at least 7 or 8 reincarnated soul of all things. At most, the tyrant race and god race had as many as 60 reincarnated soul of all things. Moreover, each and every one of them had heaven-defying talent and astonishing strength. In the eyes of the various powerhouses, they weren't any weaker than the killing god Qin Hao. In fact, they were even stronger. It was also because of this reason that the 10 galaxies became restless again. It was fine if they were weak and were dominated by the vast universe galaxy, but they also had reincarnated soul of all things, and they were even stronger. How could they let the vast universe galaxy do whatever they wanted? Of course, they couldn't violate the rare unification situation and the original integration of the tokens and signed contract. Moreover, they also recognized the huge changes after the unification of the ancient chaos boundless world, so it was impossible for them to split again. However, the position of the ruler could still be competed for. This was something that had been agreed upon when the council was established. Therefore, even Yi Lan, who was the strongest in martial arts, couldn't stop this from happening. At this moment, it was the competition between the human race and the tyrants. The Grand Mist Supremacy Realm and the Daluo Golden Wonderland were both eligible to participate. This rule was set because of the soul of all things, because all the souls of all things were the Daluo Golden Wonderland. Xiao Feng of the human race. It's really teacher Si Xian's clone. I can confirm it just by looking at her. Her aura is very strong, but unfortunately in front of the soul of all things, even if she's one realm higher, it's still not enough. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Book Number 32766692. I am the master of all worlds. Only I am the master of all worlds. This was another masterpiece after the Endless Dantian. If you like it, please take a look. Thank you. Chapter 1494. While the crowd was buzzing with discussion, Chen Hao appeared directly in front of the vast universe galaxy's camp. His sudden appearance should have attracted a lot of attention and shock. However, the people around clearly saw him, but they acted as if they didn't see him. It was as if Chen Hao had always been there. Even the reincarnations of more than 10 celestial emperors of the human clan didn't notice him. Such a mysterious divine art surprised everyone in Chen Hao's mind. Chen Hao didn't hide his aura. The only thing he did was disguise his appearance. This was inevitable. Otherwise, no matter how mysterious Chen Hao's divine art was, it would be useless. His appearance was exactly the same as the statue in the center of the square. Who wouldn't recognize him? How could they not be surprised? Buttface Aobua, what? Buttface, who was nervously staring at Xiaofeng, suddenly froze. Since he had become a core warrior of Ao Tian, who dared to call him by his nickname. Even Huyan Aobua, the first king, and other brothers called him Brother Dong in front of others. Everyone else had to respectfully call him Brother Dog when they saw him. At this moment, someone actually called him by his nickname in front of everyone. However, it was only for a moment. Buttface suddenly looked at the person beside him with shock and excitement. God, boss? Buttface and Huyan Aobua almost lost their voices at the same time. They looked in shock at the young man who had suddenly appeared between them. However, they didn't feel anything at all and didn't know who he was. However, the familiar voice was not unfamiliar to them. If it wasn't their boss, who else could it be? However, as soon as they opened their mouths, they were stopped by Chen Hao. They didn't say anything. What are the specific rules of this competition? Chen Hao looked at the two excited people and smiled slightly. He patted their shoulders heavily with his left and right hands and spoke through soundless communication. Although Buttface tried his best to control himself, he was still so excited that tears streamed down his face. He was simple and honest and didn't know how to hide his feelings at all, let alone Brother Tianxi, whom he had followed since childhood. Huyan Aobua was also excited, but not to the point where he was speechless like Buttface. When he heard Chen Hao's question, he hurriedly spoke through soundless communication. Boss, why are you back? We missed you so much. The rules of this competition were very simple. Each galaxy would send out 100 people. Either the Daoyuo Golden Wonderland or the Grand Mist Supremacy Realm would be allowed to participate. The strongest would be determined. It's like this. Through Huyan Aobua's explanation, Chen Hao understood the process and rules of the competition. Although it sounded complicated, it was actually very simple. First, the 10 major galaxies would draw lots from 1 to 10. Then, the first and second galaxies would send out their first cultivator to compete. The cultivator who won would continue to compete, while the cultivator who lost would have to send out another cultivator from the other galaxies. As for the contestants who won the first round, if they lost the second round, their star systems did not need to send people up the stage. They would send people according to their star system serial number. For example, if contestant A from the first galaxy and contestant B from the second galaxy had a duel, if A won, then the second galaxy would have to send contestant C to continue the duel. If A kept winning, then the second galaxy would have to keep sending contestants. If Galaxy A lost after the second round, Galaxy 1 would not need to send anyone up to the stage. It would be Galaxy 3's turn to send someone. And so on and so forth. Boss, our current situation is not optimistic. The tyrants are too strong. They have 61 spirits of all things reincarnated as immortal emperors. Spirits of all things, boss, you don't know. In the past few hundred years, many of them have emerged in our chaotic Grand Thousand Worlds. There are at least a few hundred of them, and this does not include those who did not join the major galaxies or went to the Shifang territory. Yes, the spirits of all things are really too strong. However, our vast universe galaxy only has about 10 of them. The tyrants and the Protoss have about 60 of them. Look, after we entered the arena, we lost 15 rounds in a row. Even Xiaofeng had to enter the arena early. Brother Tianxi, it's good that you're back. You're now at the peak of the Grand Mist Supremacy Realm, right? Nonsense, we didn't even notice when Boss appeared beside us. It was as if he was here from the beginning. What kind of remarkable power is this? It's not just the Supreme of Hongmeng. Boss, don't tell me you're already a Dao-severing perfected immortal? Oh no, that must be it. You're not qualified to participate. Huyan Aobo said as he looked at Chen Hao with a tragic expression. Huyan Aobo didn't think that Chen Hao's remarkable power of appearing beside them was something that the Grand Mist Supremacy realm could not do. After all, Chen Hao really appeared beside them without hiding. However, not only the two of them, but even the spirits of all things nearby and the cultivators behind them didn't react at all. They all felt as if he had been there all along. This was really incredible. Therefore, Huyan Aobo was almost certain that Chen Hao had already reached the Tao severing perfected immortal. That's right, it's over. Then I'm afraid we're really going to lose control. I was still thinking of letting Brother Tianxi take my place and fight in the arena and teach them a lesson. The simple and honest Buttface felt that Huyan Aobo's guess was definitely right. He scratched his head and said gloomily, "Who said I've reached the Tao severing perfected immortal?" Chen Hao was speechless. So boss, you're from the Grand Mist Supremacy realm? Chen Hao smiled slightly. Boss, you're too abnormal. How long have you been gone? You're already a real celestial king? This is really incredible. Brother Tianxi, you're amazing. Buttface also said in shock. I'm still the Daluo Golden Wonderland, okay? Chen Hao was really speechless. The way he appeared here was indeed not something that an ordinary master could do. Even a real celestial king would find it difficult. However, how long had he been gone? These two guys were too daring. No way? This time, it was Buttface and Huyan Aobo's turn to be dumbfounded. That's the truth. Well, since I'm back, you don't have to worry. However, the spirits of all things are not something that you can defeat. Buttface, I'll take your place. Yes, Brother Tianxi. Boss, you're awesome. Boss, are you the only one back? Where are the sisters-in-law, Xiao Nan, and Brother Pan? They're all back. Don't tell them that I'm back for the time being. Chen Hao smiled slightly and pointed to his head. The two immediately rubbed their palms excitedly again. Yes, let's give them a surprise. Don't tell me that Senior Yilan doesn't know? Huyan Aobo looked at Yilan, who was full of worry on the rostrum, and asked. Except for the two of you, no one knows. Boss, you're really abnormal. You passed through the seal of the Holy Temple silently, and Senior Yilan didn't even notice? Stop flattering me. Let's watch the competition. Chen Hao said as he slapped the back of Huyan Aobo's head. Buttface just smiled foolishly. His previous worries had completely disappeared. Brother Tianxi was his reassurance. Even if he knew that Brother Tianxi was only the Daluo Jingxian at this moment and would be facing many powerful spirits of all things, he didn't have the slightest doubt that Brother Tianxi would win the final victory. Chapter 1495. Xiaofeng, the immortality legend of the human tribe, is Si Xian's life, right? Not bad. Whether it's your state of mind, will, or physical body, they're all very good. Unfortunately, you're still nothing in front of me. Are you going to admit defeat, or do you want me to attack? In the arena, the tyrant's disciple, who had won 15 rounds in a row, narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiaofeng with a burning gaze. It was as if he wanted to see through Xiaofeng, and he did not hide the lascivious look in his eyes. You talk too much nonsense. Xiaofeng's face turned cold, and she immediately attacked. Her majestic and terrifying physical strength and inextinguishable aura burst out. Whoosh! At the same time, Xiaofeng's violent attack contained a desolate aura that made one's heart palpitate. It swept across the area, and in an instant, all the cultivators in the martial arts practice field clearly felt a deathly stillness. All the vitality quickly became desolate. Not bad. Others did not know, but Chen Hao saw this scene and nodded slightly. Previously, when he was in the Mountain of Corpses and Sea of Blood, he had integrated the 3 major immortal scriptures of the chaotic Great Thousand World, but it did not help Xiaofeng to comprehend and cultivate. However, at this moment, Xiaofeng had obviously comprehended the Earth Desolation scripture to an extremely high level. Moreover, in terms of absolute strength, she was not inferior to the tyrant's cultivator at all. You've learned the Immortal Emperor's Lost technique? It's not bad, but unfortunately, it's just an ordinary Immortal Emperor's Lost technique. It's just a superficial understanding of the primary principle of the Great Tao. Boom. Although the tyrant's cultivator was slightly surprised, he was not afraid at all. The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. It seemed slow, but it was actually fast. In an instant, it condensed into an extremely mysterious rune and charged toward Xiaofeng. Rumble. In the terrifying explosion of energy, the tyrant's cultivator did not retreat. Instead, his figure swayed and he approached Xiaofeng like a ghost. Since you want to fight, I'll play with you. The tyrant's cultivator's hands suddenly turned into sharp and ethereal claws and attacked Xiaofeng's plump breasts from an extremely tricky angle. Shameless! Xiaofeng was furious and suddenly retreated. At the same time, she launched another fierce attack. Unfortunately, Xiaofeng, who seemed to be on par with the tyrants in terms of strength and aura, was easily forced into a fluster by the other party. In a moment, he was completely at a disadvantage. Moreover, everyone could tell that the tyrant's cultivators had no intention of defeating Xiaofeng as soon as possible. Instead, they were teasing him. Xiaofeng admit defeat. Yilan, whose brows were tightly knitted, couldn't bear to see Xiaofeng being humiliated and directly ordered in an unquestionable manner. Although her opponent hadn't succeeded yet, Darkwind's face was still flushed red with anger. As she heard her master's words, she was extremely unwilling. If she were to admit defeat, then in vast universe galaxy, besides the 16 reincarnated immortal emperors, no one else would be able to stop her opponent. And these 16 people were the hope of vast universe galaxy. The competition had just begun, and the other 8 galaxies hadn't even stepped onto the stage yet. How could she allow them to step onto the stage? But if she didn't listen to her master, what she would face might not be as simple as a defeat. At the moment when Xiaofeng was caught between a rock and a hard place and was filled with unwillingness, a surprised expression suddenly appeared on her face. Soon after, it disappeared. Practically no one noticed Xiaofeng's momentary abnormality. But at this moment, Xiaofeng said, "Master, it's fine. Don't worry." As soon as Xiaofeng finished speaking, before Yilan could say anything, her figure suddenly trembled and directly disappeared on the spot. This caused the arrogant and domineering tyrant's cultivator who was determined to win to miss. Great teleportation technique? Amazing! To be able to comprehend to such a realm, it's very, very amazing. Xiaofeng, I realize that I'm liking you more and more. Be my cultivation companion. With my dual cultivation, I guarantee that you'll step into the immortal emperor realm. Although the tyrant's cultivator couldn't see Xiaofeng's figure for a while, he could completely sense her aura. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry. Moreover, as he said, Xiaofeng's talent really made him tempted. She's indeed an immortal legend of vast universe galaxy. This is just one of her lives, and it's not her original body. If her original body fuses into one, her talent will definitely not be mediocre even in the immortal world. If she can be my cultivation companion, it'll be great too. This woman is mine for sure. No one can snatch her away from me. At this moment, not only the tyrant's cultivator who was fighting Xiaofeng, but many of the spirits of all creation present had the same thought. However, at this moment, an extremely sharp sword light appeared out of thin air in front of the tyrant's cultivator. It carried endless mysteries and the indestructible ultimacy that was many times more powerful than before. It triggered the Tao law of heaven and earth and violently attacked. Go to hell. Rumble, a cold and delicate voice rang out. The sword light had already pierced the tyrant's cultivator's glabella and exploded with a loud bang. A shrill scream followed. How is this possible? How is this possible? I'm going to kill you, bitch. You destroyed my physical body and soul. A dazzling golden godhead flew out from the tyrant's cultivator's destroyed physical body and soul. It roared wildly and was unable to restrain its anger. At this moment, the pressure of the godhead spread wildly and shocked countless people. Suppress it. Xiaofeng, who was obviously overwhelmed by the power of the divinity, instantly turned pale. At this moment, she gritted her teeth as if she had exhausted the last of her strength. Suddenly, she took out a golden rune and threw it at the tyrant's cultivator's divinity. Buzz. In an instant, the golden rune bloomed with endless mysterious and ancient rune light. It sealed the sky and locked down the earth. It was like a huge mountain that directly pressed on the godhead. Accompanied by a shrill scream, the pressure of the godhead instantly receded like the tide until it disappeared. Immediately after, the golden rune slowly sank into Xiaofeng's glabella. It was a long story, but in fact, everything happened in a flash. No one had expected such an outcome. Even Yi Lan's eyes widened in shock. What the hell was that? When did his disciple have a golden rune that could suppress the godhead? When did she cultivate the great teleportation technique to such a high level? She could even simulate and hide her aura, causing the opponent to misperceive her? Yi Lan, who knew his disciple the best, could not believe his eyes at this moment. Xiao Feng of the human clan wins. The members of the 10 Lives arbitration team had to announce Xiao Feng's victory. This was agreed before the competition. The godhead of the soul of all creatures was indestructible. As long as the physical body and soul were destroyed, it would be considered a failure. Xiao Feng, Xiao Feng, Xiao Feng. Cheers erupted from the vast universe galaxy's camp. No one expected Xiao Feng to be able to defeat the soul of all creatures. No one expected Xiao Feng to have a golden rune that could suppress the godhead. However, this was not important. A victory was what they needed the most. Just as Xiao Feng was about to jump out of the arena, the tyrants suddenly stood up and stopped her. Leave Lu Han's godhead. It belongs to the tyrants. Chapter 1496. Xiao Feng frowned slightly but didn't say anything. He looked at Yi Lan, who was in the middle of the platform. This wasn't agreed before the competition. The winner is king and the loser is a bandit. His godhead and all his belongings naturally belong to the winner, Yi Lan said in a low voice. Brother Yi, you've gone too far. How can the godhead be compared to his belongings? The godhead is Lu Han, and Lu Han is the godhead. For the competition, the godhead is just him, who is seriously injured. He's a member of the tyrants, so shouldn't it belong to us? What do you think, counselors? The tyrants' leader said. That's right. Counselor Wu is right. Lu Han's godhead should belong to the tyrants. Brother Yi, you're wrong to do that. We know that the human clan has too few spirits of all creation, but you can't snatch others, right? Immediately, the 2 counselors from the Earth Demon clan and the Ghost clan agreed. The 2 of them stood on the tyrant's side without hesitation. Obviously, they had already decided on this matter. The tyrants had 61 spirits of all creation, and they had received accurate information that one of them was a top figure even in the immortal world. It could be said that the tyrants had almost 100% control of the vast thousand primordial world this time. Moreover, from then on, it would be difficult for anyone to shake their position. As for them, who were relatively weaker, if they joined the tyrants now, they would undoubtedly benefit from the distribution of resources in the future. Snatch? My disciple was lucky enough to win and subdued the godhead. That's equivalent to killing Lu Han in the battle. That's her spoils of war. How is that snatching? Cut the crap. If you're not convinced, you can fight with me. Don't forget that I'm still the acting ruler of the vast thousand primordial world. Do you really think that you can dominate in the future just because you have more spirits of all creation? Not to mention that the current spirits of all creation is only in the Daluo Golden Wonderland. Even if they advance to the immortal king realm in the future, our counselor, Chen Hao, will still be in existence that they can't surpass. Yi Lan said domineeringly. Since Lu Han's godhead has been suppressed by Xiao Feng, it's reasonable for it to belong to Xiao Feng. However, Brother Yi, regarding the matter of Grim Reaper Chen Hao, Brother Yi shouldn't jump to conclusions. Everything depends on strength. If you can summon him back and defeat them, then we'll admit defeat. Otherwise, anything you say will be useless. Previously, his talent and potential were indeed unrivaled in the ancient chaos Great Thousand Worlds, and he indeed shouldn't be an ordinary spirit of all living things, but at best, he was just not ordinary. To be precise, none of us felt the pressure of his godhead. But now, At this point, I can clearly tell you, and of course, your galaxies as well, that one of the spirits of all things of the Protoss is the reincarnation of a celestial venerable level expert. Even in the immortal realm, he is a top existence. No matter how strong God of Slaughter Chen Hao is, how can he be compared to the reincarnation of a heavenly venerable? What? When the Protoss rulers saw that the Earth demon race and the phantom race were on the side of the tyrants, he did not hesitate and directly revealed the powerful trump card of the Protoss race. This shocked Yi Lan and the other rulers of the major galaxies. The only ones who could still maintain their composure were the powerful tyrants. Fine. Since you say so, then so be it. Don't regret it in the next round. The disciples of the tyrants will definitely get back 10 or 100 times more. Oh no, you humans only have 16 spirits of all things. It's impossible to get 100 times more, huh? The ruler of the tyrants said unhappily, but he could only give up. Duel with Yi Lan? He did not have the strength to do so. Let the competition continue, Yi Lan said with an embarrassed expression. The situation was pressing. Yi Lan could not do anything about the powerful tyrants saying such threatening words. The only thing he could do was to remind the disciples of the human race to be careful. He was already mentally prepared to lose control of the ancient chaos Great Thousand Worlds temporarily. There was no need to let the spirits of all things of the human race fight with their lives on the line. Xiao Feng jumped out of the arena directly. Xiao Feng won this round, so she could withdraw. The tyrants, who had won 15 rounds in a row before losing, did not need to send anyone up to the arena. It was the turn of the 3 and 4 galaxies to enter the arena. After Xiao Feng came down from the arena, she went directly to Chen Hao and squeezed Huyan Aobo out of the way. She turned her small face and stared straight at the disguised Chen Hao. My good disciple, you're back? Xiao Feng said telepathically. Little girl, don't call me that. Chen Hao pretended to stare fiercely at Xiao Feng. All right, since you're so powerful, I won't make things difficult for you. Sigh, I've worked very hard. I always thought that I could surpass her, but I didn't expect her to be so strong. She's not just a little bit stronger. What's more, she's in the same realm. Xiao Feng was able to kill the spirits of all creatures of the tyrants. Naturally, it was not her own ability. Instead, Xi Xian's original body had used the mystery of the 9 lives mystic technique to integrate directly into her body. Xi Xian was able to temporarily replace her in the battle against the tyrant's cultivators. Their experiences in the immortal emperor's Great Thousand Worlds, King Ying's special training, and especially the time they spent in Chen Hao's mind, caused Xi Xian and the others' strength to soar by leaps and bounds. The freakish space-time laws and the environment of the minor immortal world made it impossible for them to progress slowly. Therefore, in addition to attacking the opponent when he was unprepared, he could destroy the opponent's physical body and soul abode without the opponent taking the initiative to use the godhead. Only the golden runes were naturally condensed by Chen Hao. All of this was within Chen Hao's calculations. However, Xi Xian could not withstand the godhead's godhead, even the weakest immortal emperor godhead. This was an irreparable gap. How long has it been since you stepped into the Supreme of Hongmeng? Of course, Xi Xian is indeed very strong. You will be even stronger after the fusion. You have advantages that she doesn't have, and she also has advantages that you are stronger in. Fusion? Is that still me? But it's not up to me. If she wants to control my body, she controls it. If she wants to integrate into me, she integrates into me. If she wants to give me a chance to speak, I'm talking to you. Everything is under her control, Xiao Feng said dejectedly. All these years, or to be exact, ever since she quarreled with the original Xi Xian because of Chen Hao, she had been cultivating crazily and doing her best to improve herself. However, she now realized that the gap between her and the original Xi Xian had only narrowed. Combat power, state of mind, will, Dao laws, and so on made her feel like she was looking up at a tall mountain. Perhaps she would never be able to catch up to the original Xi Xian in this lifetime. In such a situation, she could not help but feel discouraged. That's not it. Xi Xian can't control you at all. Just now, the situation was critical. I was afraid that you would not accept her, so I played a role. Otherwise, you and Si Xian would be equal. Chapter 1497. Chen Hao paused slightly and continued, "Moreover, you don't have to worry. After the fusion, you won't be you. You grew up step by step under equal conditions. After the fusion, you will be her and she will be you. After all, you two don't have any conflict at all." Perhaps. Now, your words are biased towards her. Good disciple, forget it, fusion is fusion. But before the fusion, please allow me to despise her once. Original body, I despise you. No matter how hard your mouth is, in the end, didn't you fall in love with the one I love? See you later, or will there be no chance to see you again, Chen Hao? I don't know. I hope you didn't lie to me. Damn girl. Can't wait anymore? Don't think that I can't feel your excitement. What are you pretending for? You obviously want to fuse with me, but you're still so stubborn. However, you'd better jump around a little longer. Now isn't the time to truly fuse. Si Xian's voice sounded in Xiaofeng's mind. She seemed to be abnormally angry. This wasn't Si Xian's style. From this, it could be seen that she was her greatest enemy. Otherwise, how could Si Xian lose her composure so easily? Miss Xiao, congratulations, congratulations. I didn't expect your strength to be so strong. I heard that this life of yours is just an avatar? At this time, a cultivator not far from Chen Hao and Xiaofeng came directly in front of Xiaofeng and said with a smile, "This person's aura and strength were the strongest among the 16 spirits of all living things in vast universe galaxy." Chen Hao's abnormal perception had already evaluated the spirits of all living things in vast universe galaxy when he just came over. "Yes, what's wrong?" Xiaofeng smiled faintly. "Is your original body strong? Much stronger than me." Xiaofeng didn't hide and said bluntly, "Then you two will have to fuse in the end, right?" "Naturally." "After the fusion, will you still be you?" Hearing the other party's words, Xiaofeng frowned slightly and said, "Su Wenxing, if you have something to say, just say it directly. No need to beat around the bush." "Alright, Michelle. The path of cultivation is a long one, and if you're able to find a Tao companion that appreciates you and is in love with you all along the way, then it would undoubtedly be much more colorful. I like women like you. If you agree to become my Tao companion, then I can allow you to replace your main body and take control of your quintessence. You'll advance hand in hand with me and become an immortal companion that heads to the immortal dimension together." The wisest of all things called Su Wenxing had a gentle appearance to begin with. At this moment, his white robe was spotless, and his face carried a faint smile as he stared at Xiaofeng, filled with confidence. To be honest, this would be extremely lethal to any woman. After all, he was the spirit of all things, and he was a top figure amongst the spirit of all things. Becoming his Tao companion was practically equivalent to obtaining the ticket to the immortal dimension, so how could anyone not be moved? Many female human cultivators looked at Xiaofeng enviously. They were just short of shouting together. In Su Wenxing's opinion, since he said so, Xiaofeng would definitely be flattered and throw herself into his arms. But, hearing such a direct and conditional confession, Xiaofeng was first stunned, then surprised, and then frowned. Finally, to everyone's bafflement, she actually looked at Chen Hao beside her. However, at this moment, no one knew that this man was the god of slaughter, Chen Hao. At the same time, it was only at this moment that everyone felt a little strange. Who was this man? Those who were able to stand at the forefront were all one of the 100 contestants representing the vast universe galaxy, but everyone had actually forgotten who this man was. In fact, it wasn't that everyone had forgotten, but that they simply didn't know there was an additional person. Who is this? He's obviously been there all along, so how come I don't recognize him? Could it be that he's the spirit of all things hidden in our vast universe galaxy? It seems so. He seems to be very familiar with General Dong and General Huyan. Strange, I don't have any impression of him at all. In the midst of everyone's surprised voices, Yi Lan, who had been watching this scene from the rostrum, also looked at Chen Hao with a surprised expression. The more he looked, the more surprised he was, and the brighter his eyes became. "Sorry, thank you very much for your appreciation of me, but I am his person. Everything has to be decided by him, so you should ask him." To everyone's surprise, Xiao Feng actually said this. His person? Who is he? Isn't Xiao Feng the person of our boss, God of Slaughter, Chen Hao? This is news spread by one of Proud Heaven's core generals. Many people were shocked. Although the relationship between Wind Breeze and Chen Hao hadn't been established in the slightest, Wind Breeze had come out of seclusion in recent years. In order to ensure that Wind Breeze didn't get harassed, the core generals of Proud Heaven had intentionally spread the word that Wind Breeze and Chen Hao were related. How could they let their sister-in-law be harassed by random people? Or you? Su Wensheng frowned slightly, looking at Chen Hao with a proud gaze, and asked in a deep voice. He didn't expect Xiao Feng to reject him so straightforwardly and in such a way. However, there was one thing he was sure of. The man in front of him, whether it was his aura or appearance, was too ordinary. How could he be compared to him? This was simply an insult. However, just as Chen Hao smiled and was about to say something, a stream of light suddenly streaked across the sky. To everyone's surprise, Yi Lan suddenly appeared beside Chen Hao. What was even more shocking was that Yi Lan directly bowed and said, "Yi Lan respectfully welcomes the return of the Assembly President, God of Slaughter, Chen Hao to Ancient Chaos." Boom. Yi Lan respectfully welcomes the return of the Assembly President, God of Slaughter, Chen Hao to Ancient Chaos. Yi Lan's voice was like a thunderclap that resounded deafeningly through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, causing everyone to be unable to react. Even Chen Hao himself was slightly stunned. How did he recognize it? It shouldn't be. "Welcome, boss." "Welcome back, God of Slaughter, Chen Hao." "Welcome back, Assembly President." Although the members of Proud Heaven didn't recognize Chen Hao as the killing god, they immediately dropped to their knees and kowtowed, trembling with excitement. That was especially true of the cultivators who had followed Chen Hao in the past. They were so moved that they were choking with emotion. As they thought about Chen Hao's past, streams of faith power surged through them. But this time, it was as if some sort of god-devil had possessed them, causing their quintessence, energy, and auras to rise to new heights. Boom! Under the impact of the majestic river of faith, the power of faith that Chen Hao had been suppressing finally erupted. Suddenly, with his glabella as the core, a strong golden holy light gushed out from his body, rising uncontrollably and forming 9 halos around him. It was as if the Buddha had descended, and a vision of heaven and earth appeared. It was as if the sound of the Great Way had come from the 9th heaven, reverberating in the depths of everyone's hearts. God of Slaughter, Chen Hao. It really is God of Slaughter, Chen Hao. What? He's God of Slaughter, Chen Hao? What terrifying power of faith! Who could possibly stand up to him? Chapter 1498. Numerous gazes filled with shock and horror looked at Chen Hao, who was slowly rising under the power of faith, and their hearts were filled with shock. Of course, those who felt this way were cultivators who had no faith in Chen Hao. This is Chen Hao, the God of Slaughter? What a strong power of faith. His influence is indeed spread throughout ancient chaos. Every galaxy has a lot of believers. Almost everyone in the vast universe galaxy is his believer. Strange, I don't sense the aura of the spirit of all living things on him. Really? I didn't sense it either. If he isn't the spirit of all living things, it's useless no matter how strong the power of faith is. Yeah, don't worry. Even if he's the spirit of all living things, can he be stronger than Lu Tianyan of the Tyrants? Although some of the spirits of all living things were slightly surprised by Chen Hao's influence in ancient chaos, they didn't really take it to heart. Although the power of faith was strong, it couldn't exert much of an advantage under the pressure of a godhead. Especially if the godhead was of a high grade, it could be directly intimidated. Chen Hao was slightly surprised when he sensed the majestic and terrifying power of faith. Receiving faith face-to-face and receiving it across time and space were two completely different concepts. Chen Hao could clearly feel the heart of every devout believer and hear the voice of every believer, including Yi Lan. When Yi Lan suddenly bowed, Chen Hao knew that there was no way for him to avoid this. He had to directly take over the current situation. This was Yi Lan's trust in him. If he couldn't even resolve the current problem even after returning, wouldn't that mean that he temporarily lost control of ancient chaos? Therefore, Chen Hao calmly accepted everyone's greetings and opened up the source of faith, connecting with the power of faith of countless devout believers and feeding them back. Chen Hao knew very well that this was his chance to act cool. Moreover, he had to act cool. He had to make those who believed in him more firmly and become more devout. He had to shock those who didn't believe in him and leave behind the seeds of faith. This was the awareness that a superior person must have. Therefore, Chen Hao didn't hesitate to activate the endless Tao law and integrate the profound meaning of the profound Buddhist scriptures. Moreover, the activation became stronger and stronger. Plop, plop, plop. While many cultivators and spirits of all things were still discussing Chen Hao, something that shocked them happened again. Some young cultivators who did not bow at first, which meant that they did not believe in killing God Chen Hao, actually began to kneel down one after another. In an instant, their faces were filled with sincere prayers as they became believers of killing God Chen Hao. Not good. The profound meaning of the supreme Buddhist secret technique, the art of great purification, is actually contained in his Sanskrit mantra of the great Tao. Controllers, why aren't you stopping him? If this continues, most of the people here will become his followers. Almost at the same time, Lu Tianyan, the spirit of all things from the tyrants, and Shen Tuoling, the spirit of all things from the Protoss, both spoke loudly. They did not hold back at all and directly resounded throughout the entire martial arts arena. God of slaughter Chen Hao. Chen Hao. As soon as Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling finished speaking, the controllers of the tyrants, the Protoss, and several other galaxies directly spoke. Although they were only calling out Chen Hao, their voices were filled with their strongest Tao law and resounded throughout the world, waking everyone up from the Sanskrit mantra of the great Tao that they had just believed in. Chen Hao, why didn't you say anything when you came back? If you had known earlier, you wouldn't have made such a big fuss. The Protoss controller directly soared into the sky and rose to a height higher than Chen Hao. He looked down at Chen Hao and said with a fake smile. Pumph. Chen Hao snorted coldly and took a step forward. No one could sense his aura, let alone see his figure clearly, but he had already arrived in front of the Protoss controller. Boom. At this moment, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly erupted from between Chen Hao's eyebrows. The God Race Overlord suddenly cried out in alarm. It was as if a mountain had suddenly smashed into his body. There was no room for him to resist at all. With a loud crash, he fell to the ground. When everyone saw the scene in front of them, they were all dumbfounded. Even all the spirits of all living things present were dumbfounded. How dare a sixth heaven-severing Tao true immortal act so arrogantly in front of me? If it weren't for your status as a counselor and your previous contributions, I would have crippled you right now. Chen Hao said arrogantly and disdainfully as he stepped on the Protoss controller. The boundless blood energy, the terrifying power of faith, the terrifyingly powerful pressure, and the boundless profound Tao laws had all merged into one with the heavens and the earth. At this moment, Chen Hao was the heavens and the earth were Chen Hao. His absolute strength had far surpassed the shackles of his own realm. At this moment, he was like a god, carrying out punishment on behalf of the heavens. Token. Shameless, Chen Hao. What kind of ability are you using the ancient chaos token? The Protoss controller's face was full of humiliation. The dignified number one of the Protoss was actually being stepped on by a Daluo Jinxian. Even if the other party was killing God Chen Hao, it still made him lose face. However, it was only at this moment that he remembered how terrifying killing God Chen Hao was. Back then, he was already so terrifying. Now that he had improved, how could he compare to this monster? Some people could never be measured by their realm. Killing God Chen Hao was no doubt this kind of person. However, at this moment, he was not convinced because he could clearly feel the suppression of heaven and earth. That was the supreme Tao law, an ability that only the ancient chaos token, which had merged with the tokens of the 10 major galaxies, had. As the recognized controller back then, Chen Hao had the ability to use it. Ancient chaos token? It's with old man. However, as soon as the Protoss controller finished speaking, Yilan took out the ancient chaos token that he had been keeping. Impossible. How is this possible? The controllers of the Tyrant race, Sky Demon race, Insect race, and other galaxies all sucked in a breath of cold air. Killing God Qin Hao was only in the Daluo Golden Wonderland now. Even if he borrowed the power of faith, how could he be so powerful that he could step on a sixth heaven true immortal stage Protoss controller without being able to move? Disperse for me. Suddenly, the Protoss soul of all things, Shin Tuoling, the strongest soul of all things in the Protoss race and a heavenly venerable level soul of all things, stepped out from the crowd. A bright blood-red light directly gushed out from between his eyebrows, illuminating the entire world. It was also at this moment that a kind of pressure that made everyone's soul tremble and not dare to resist directly acted on their soul and state of mind. The pressure of a heavenly venerable level godhead. Boom. It was also at this moment that Qin Hao's power of faith suddenly weakened by a lot. The state of being one with millions of people was directly dispelled. As for Qin Hao, who was only in the Daluo Golden Wonderland, the amount of power of faith that he could control decreased by a lot. Heavenly venerable level godhead pressure. Many of the Protoss race's soul of all things exclaimed in shock and retreated continuously. Chapter 1499. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Shin Tuoling. A god race heavenly venerable. That was an extreme Dao heavenly venerable Yangshin, who was much stronger than an immortal Dao heavenly venerable. It was just that it was much easier for an extreme Dao heavenly venerable to advance. This was the price of an extreme Dao heavenly venerable being stronger than an extreme Dao heavenly venerable. At this moment, in everyone's eyes, the pressure of Shin Tuoling's heavenly venerable godhead had cut off Qin Hao's power of heaven and earth. To be able to comprehend ancient chaos supreme Dao law, you have some skill. To be able to control such a huge amount of faith power is also very strong. Unfortunately, you are not the spirit of all living beings. In front of my godhead, you are nothing but a chicken and a dog. Shen Tuoling looked at Qin Hao, whose Buddhist light had disappeared, his faith power weakened, and the power of heaven and earth receded. He took a step forward and arrived in front of Qin Hao. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked down at Qin Hao as he spoke. A reincarnated heavenly venerable of the immortal world. So strong. Too strong. A heavenly venerable is worthy of being a top existence in the immortal world. Just the pressure of his godhead suppressed Qin Hao. Many people exclaimed in shock. However, no one noticed that although the cultivators who had joined Qin Hao's army of faith had lost the power of faith and stopped praying at this moment, their expressions were extremely calm. Their gazes towards Qin Hao were still filled with excitement and worship, and even a trace of madness. A chicken and a dog? Interesting. Qin Hao said with a faint smile. He didn't seem to be affected by Shin Tuoling's godhead pressure at all. After speaking, his figure shook and disappeared on the spot. When he appeared once more, Qin Hao was already standing proudly on the arena. His tall and slender figure emanated sword insight and battle intent that shot into the sky, and his pitch-black eyes were like the most dazzling stars in the night sky as they slowly swept past all the masters and spirits of all things in the 10 galaxies. I'm right here. If you're not convinced, come one by one, or all together, it's fine. If you can defeat me, you can take control of ancient chaos. If you can't, die. No matter who it is. A calm, cold, but arrogant and domineering voice resounded in everyone's ears. When he finished speaking, there was no murderous intent, but the temperature of the entire martial arts practice field seemed to have dropped to the freezing point. Many cultivators, no matter which galaxy they were from, showed a look of horror. God of Slaughter Qin Hao. This was the true aura of the God of Slaughter Qin Hao. The God of Slaughter Qin Hao, who had once dominated the 10 Directions domain and the extraterritorial battlefield, had appeared once again. They, especially the cultivators who had witnessed the might of the God of Slaughter Qin Hao, felt a bone-piercing chill at this moment. It was as if they could see the scene of blood flowing like a river. Unfortunately, Qin Hao's words, Qin Hao's aura, and Chen Hao's gaze did not have the slightest effect on the spirits of all things present. They only felt annoyed. Arrogant. You're just a country bumpkin who isn't even the wisest of all living beings. How dare you be so arrogant? Idiot, I can beat you to death in a one-on-one fight, but you still want to fight in a group? Why don't you take a good look at yourself? Are you worthy? You're simply courting death. There's no need to use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Brother Shin, let me take care of a moron like you. Swish. When a wisest of all living beings from the Shin clan with a powerful aura saw that Shin Tuoling was about to enter the arena, he took a step forward and was willing to be a pawn. An idiot who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today Li Feng will let you know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Who do you think you are, huh? After this cultivator stepped onto the stage, he introduced himself and looked as if he was about to explode the heavens. He roared at Chen Hao with his nostrils. Of course, he was not an idiot. He had seen Chen Hao's strength, so the moment he entered the arena, he had already released the pressure of his divine spark. He believed that relying on the suppression of the divine spark's pressure, he had no problem defeating Chen Hao. When facing Shin Tuoling previously, although Chen Hao did not have the slightest reaction to his pressure, in his opinion, Chen Hao was definitely pretending. Otherwise, he would not have teleported onto the arena and continued to be arrogant. Because I'm the god of slaughter, Chen Hao. Chen Hao's expression became calmer and colder as he said, In the 10 great galaxies, many wisest of all living beings laughed loudly, looking at Chen Hao as if looking at an idiot. What was the god of slaughter, Chen Hao? But Chen Hao's believers, brothers and sisters, Yi Lan, and the others, their blood boiled because of Chen Hao's calm and cold words. They believed in Chen Hao. How arrogant and domineering was this? I've seen arrogant people, but I've never seen someone as arrogant as you. Go to hell. Boom. The god race's Li Feng laughed loudly and suddenly urged the divine spark's pressure and his strongest strength with all his strength. At this moment, the blood energy that bloomed from his body seemed to pierce through the sky. An indescribably terrifying power and great Tao aura that was relative to his own realm bloomed from between his brows as he punched out. There was no gaudy, no complicated runes, only the most masculine, most powerful, and most simple charm of the great Tao. One technique to break all techniques. This move caused one exclamation after another, and it also made everyone understand that the god race's Li Feng's strength was one of the best even among the wisest of all living beings. He was only weaker than Shin Tuoling's level. Brother Li Feng, take it easy. Such an arrogant guy, don't kill him in one move. Let us also have a taste of it. God of slaughter Chen Hao, we're all so scared, okay? One of the wisest of all living beings from the god race shouted and was full of ridicule. However, they were really worried that Li Feng would kill Chen Hao in an instant. After all, since Chen Hao had appeared now, the competition couldn't continue according to the previous procedures. If he killed him, who would have a chance to show off? But right at this moment, Chen Hao made a move. A chilly sword light flashed out from Chen Hao's hand. It didn't possess a formidable imposing aura, nor did it possess a dazzling glow, nor did it contain a profound sword Tao will. Similarly, it didn't seem to contain any profound Tao laws, yet it caused the hearts of everyone to jerk, open their eyes wide, and gasp. This cold sword light seemed to break through the laws of heaven and earth and the restraints of time and space. It jumped above the laws and was invulnerable. It easily broke through Li Feng's extremely terrifying attack, and it seemed to be extremely slow, but it approached the space between Li Feng's brows bit by bit, and then, it pierced through. It was like a slow motion. No matter how strong or weak their cultivation was, everyone saw it clearly and vividly. Bang! Li Feng's face was filled with terror, but he didn't have time to react before he turned into a bloody mist. Red and white parts flew everywhere, while the golden godhead was trying to escape. However, Chen Hao stretched out his hand and easily caught it in his palm like an inescapable net catching a bird. Besides the sounds of gasping, there was only deathly silence. Chapter 1500. Continue. Chen Hao looked calmly in the direction of the god race and said indifferently, There was no need for Chen Hao to deliberately pretend. With the effect of killing a chicken to warn the monkey, the deterrent power was already sufficient. The calmer he was, the more arrogant he seemed. The more the style of an expert was, and the stronger the deterrent power. At this time, apart from Xin Tuoling, who still dared to look directly at Chen Hao, no one dared to look directly at Chen Hao. Everyone avoided his gaze in fear and didn't dare to provoke him in the slightest. Wasn't it courting death if they continued to provoke him? Li Feng was one of the best among them, but in front of God of Slaughter Chen Hao, he couldn't withstand a single blow. Even if he used the pressure of his divine spark from the beginning, it had no effect on God of Slaughter Chen Hao. Moreover, at this moment, his divine spark was absorbed into Chen Hao's mind space without using any runes. Obviously, Chen Hao could easily suppress his divine spark by relying on his own strength. This was what terrified them the most. What, you don't dare? You, and the rest of you, don't you want to have a go? Chen Hao's mind was like tentacles that directly locked onto the nearly 10 spirits of all living beings of the god race, and he slightly hooked his hand as he spoke. These 10+ people were shockingly the ones who mocked Li Feng earlier. You don't even have this bit of backbone. Are you really spirits of all living beings? Seeing that none of them dared to answer, Chen Hao said disdainfully, weaklings. If no one challenges me within 10 minutes, I'll take it that you've given up control. Then sign a contract with me using the supreme laws of the immortal world. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. You're just spirits of all living beings. Don't take yourself too seriously. You're nothing in my eyes. Chen Hao said disdainfully. Is that so? You just killed Li Feng, whose strength was mediocre, and you think you're really invincible? You're a little strong, but it's only a little. What's there to be arrogant about? You want us to sign a contract? That's impossible. Chen Hao, don't push me too far. That's just digging your own grave. As soon as Chen Hao finished speaking, Shen Tuoling of the god race, Lu Tianyan of the tyrant race, and some other spirits of creation with stronger auras spoke one after another. Of course, it was impossible for Shen Tuoling and Lu Tianyan, who were reincarnated heavenly venerables, to admit defeat so easily. However, the others were forced by Chen Hao's words about signing a contract with the laws of the immortal world. Being temporarily weak did not mean that they would be weak in the future. After all, in this life, almost all of them had chosen the Tao that they had yearned for in their previous lives but were unable to reach. When the time came for them to merge with their original Tao, it would bring about even more changes. No one could predict what level they would reach, so how could they sign a contract? Chen Hao's actions were completely going too far, in their opinion. Otherwise, amongst the numerous spirits of all things, probably only Chen Tuoling, Lu Tianyan, and a few hidden spirits of all things would stand out and fight Chen Hao, whereas the others would choose to remain silent for now. You talk too much nonsense. Come one by one, or come together. If there's no one in 10 minutes, then sign the contract. If not, die. Chen Hao said proudly. Chen Hao's words made everyone look at Shen Tuoling of the god race and Lu Tianyan of the tyrant race. Both of them were heavenly venerables on the surface, and they were the two strongest spirits of all things. The terrifying power that Chen Hao had just displayed was definitely not something that ordinary spirits of all things could contend against. Therefore, the two of them naturally became the hope of many spirits of all things. No one was willing to be forced to sign a contract with the supreme laws of the immortal world. Shen Tuoling and Lu Tianyan looked at each other, both full of confidence and arrogance. Heavenly venerate Ling Tua, right? Heavenly venerate Yen, right? Do you want to go, or should I? Shen Tuoling smiled and transmitted his voice. The two of them had long sensed each other's auras and guessed each other's former identities through their names. The battle between you and me is the battle of the pinnacle. You don't want to be exposed before you meet me, and I don't want to be exposed before I meet you either. Lu Tianyan said loudly. He didn't transmit his voice, but deliberately let everyone hear him. Then he continued to transmit his voice, and this kid's strength isn't weak. Although he didn't reveal the aura of a divine spark, since he can say that he signed the supreme contract of the immortal world, he's naturally a reincarnated spirit of all things. What do you think? Great minds think alike. Shin Tuoling transmitted his voice. Since this kid is so arrogant, why don't the two of us, as well as everyone, join forces to destroy this kid first, then start the competition to determine who the controller belongs to? Lu Tianyen said loudly again. That makes sense. Then let's kill this arrogant kid together. Shen Tuoling laughed loudly. If it were him, he wouldn't be able to put down his face and win with numbers. Even if Chen Hao arrogantly took the initiative to announce that all the spirits of all things could attack together, he wouldn't be able to do it. That was the pride of a heavenly venerate, and he couldn't afford to lose face. But Lu Tianyen's words made him have no concerns in this regard. Even if they joined forces to kill Chen Hao, they wouldn't lose face in the slightest. Because none of them were willing to reveal their strength before meeting the other. What a dignified reason. That's right. Let's destroy this arrogant guy first, then decide the victor. Yes, let's attack together. Sign the immortal world contract? Simply dreaming. If he wants to sign it, we'll make him sign it. Okay, let's attack together. Many spirits of all things responded. Even the spirits of all things who hadn't spoken before spoke at this moment, all of them gathering their auras and preparing for battle. Voila, shameless. Reincarnated heavenly venerates, spirits of all things, are all such shameless people? So shameless, what bullshit heavenly venerates, spirits of all things, damn it, I think they're just a bunch of spineless trash. But since the president dares to let them attack together, he's naturally fearless. Yes, kill them all. God of Slaughter Chen Hao is invincible. President is invincible. Kill. Chen Hao's believers in the vast universe galaxy and other galaxies began to curse the spirits of all things shamelessly. Soon, their shouts turned into cheers for Chen Hao. However, I have to make one thing clear. Only those who attack together will have the qualifications to continue competing for the position of controller. If you don't, you'll lose your qualifications. Does everyone agree? Lu Tianyen said again. Clearly, this guy wasn't just the reincarnation of a powerful heavenly venerate, but he was also an expert at playing tricks. Even the spirits of all things of the human race weren't spared. Because at this moment, except for the 16 spirits of all things of the human race, the other 9 galaxies' spirits of all things had all responded. Since that's the case, for the future of the vast universe galaxy, I, Su Wenxing, can only take action. The strongest of the 16 spirits of all things of the human race, Su Wenxing, who had just been rejected by Xiao Feng and had lost all face, shook his head helplessly and said. As he spoke, his aura began to strengthen, and he slowly flew towards the arena. Chapter 1501. Shoo, fuck. What is this? To think that he's from our vast universe galaxy? Bah. Damn it. I was optimistic about this kind of trash before. Hurry up and die. Su Wenxing's appearance made the cultivators of the vast universe galaxy boo again and again. They were abnormally angry, and many people couldn't help but curse. This was really too shameless. No matter what, God of Slaughter Chen Hao was from the vast universe galaxy. At this moment, even if they couldn't help, they couldn't hit him when he was down, right? Even if it was because of Xiao Feng's previous rejection, in front of righteousness, they had to give way. However, Su Wenxing risked universal condemnation and joined forces with the spirits of all living things from other galaxies to fight against God of Slaughter Chen Hao. Fortunately, the remaining 15 spirits of all living things of the human race didn't move in the end. Boom. Boom boom boom. On the stage, an incomparably powerful aura bloomed. The terrifying pressure of divine sparks stirred heaven and earth, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Golden light surged, as if condensing into a golden river, pressing down on Chen Hao. The battle hadn't started yet, but the terrifying pressure of the divine sparks had already made everyone tremble in fear. At this moment, Chen Hao was like a lonely boat floating in a tsunami. In everyone's eyes, he could be swallowed by the golden sea at any time. However, Chen Hao stood proudly while his expression was still calm to the extreme. He didn't care about Lu Tianyen and Qin Tuoling's shamelessness in the slightest. Attacking them together was the result he wanted the most. Because only in this way would he be able to annihilate them together. Otherwise, would the other dare to attack him after he killed one? As for Su Wenxing, Chen Hao didn't put him in his eyes at all. He was just the strongest of the 16 spirits of all living things of the human race. Ha, God of Slaughter Chen Hao, remember not to be so arrogant in your next life. Arrogance requires capital. You want to challenge all of us alone? I really don't know where your confidence comes from. You're an idiot to the point that no one can compare. Ha, people can't live in the past. Times have changed. The Emperor Star Group has appeared, and spirits of all living things have appeared. Do you think we're the ants that you can trample on? End your own life. Perhaps I can leave you with a complete corpse. You don't have to be so cruel. You just need to destroy your Taoist root and become an ordinary person. Maybe it's a good choice for you. With your pretty face, you can live off a woman. Haha. Many spirits of all living beings taunted Chen Hao while increasing the pressure of their godheads, pressing down on Chen Hao. Although they were speaking in a relaxed manner, at this point, there was no one who wasn't apprehensive. This was because Chen Hao, who looked like he could be swallowed up by the godhood pressure at any time, didn't even frown from the beginning to the end. He allowed them to do whatever they wanted, but he still stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his body as straight as a sword. Just by standing there, he gave people a feeling that he couldn't be shaken, as if his feet were rooted to the earth, and his head was connected to the sky. With Chen Hao domineeringly killing Li Feng of the divine race before, not to mention the cultivators who thought that they were inferior to Li Feng, even Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling didn't dare to take the lead and become the target of Chen Hao's thunderous strike. Anyone could imagine that at this moment, God of Slaughter Chen Hao didn't make a move, but when he did, it would definitely be earth-shattering. The so-called spirits of all living things are nothing more than a bunch of spineless, soft-footed shrimps. Whoever blabbers again, I'll be the first to kill him. In the face of everyone's provocations, Chen Hao finally spoke. Chen Hao's calm but ice-cold words had just fallen when the spirits of all living things who were still blabbering and flaunting their sharp tongues suddenly shut up as if someone had grabbed their throats. While the surrounding crowd was dumbfounded. Vast universe galaxy and God of Slaughter Chen Hao's believers were seething with excitement. How awe-inspiring was this? One person facing so many high and mighty spirits of all living things, and just one sentence could make everyone shut up. What kind of concept was this? Lu Tianyan snorted coldly and felt deeply ashamed. After coldly glancing at the spirits of all living things who were scared to the point of shutting their mouths at the same time, he looked at Shen Tuoling and said, "Let's attack together. You should have done this long ago. You've all lost your face, a bunch of trash." Kill. As Shen Tuoling spoke the word, kill, he and Lu Tianyan attacked at the same time. Boom. Boom. Kill. 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 With the two great heavenly venerable level spirits of all living things taking the lead, the spirits of all living things surrounding Chen Hao also activated their strongest power and violently attacked. In an instant, all kinds of incomparably powerful Tao laws gushed out, covering the sky and covering the sun. It was extremely shocking, and it seemed as if the sky was about to be shattered. Endless heaven and earth energy was directly sucked out. What was even more terrifying was that the 9 heavens and 10 earths were actually connected. With Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling as the representatives, surging immortal qi surged down. In almost an instant, God of Slaughter Chen Hao was surrounded and drowned by countless terrifying divine abilities. That terrifying aura caused everyone to open their eyes wide. Chen Hao's followers even spontaneously started to pray for Chen Hao. Even Yi Lan, who trusted Chen Hao very much, clenched his fists at this moment and held his breath. No one wasn't nervous. It was also at this moment that a crimson-red spear light tore through the sea of pressure from the golden divinity, and it pierced through the numerous terrifying divine abilities as it tore through the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst endless terrifying explosions, God of Slaughter Chen Hao, a man, a spear, and a beast, man, spear, and beast as one, charged out in a domineering manner. Huh? What? Don't poo! Amidst the shocked cries of countless people, The space between the brows of one of the spirits of all living things was penetrated. After that, blood dyed the sky red as it was swallowed by the ferocious beast beneath Chen Hao. This god of slaughter Chen Hao suddenly changed directions, and like a flickering shadow, he forcefully broke through the layers of attacks with matchless violence as he stabbed out with his spear once more. What's that? How can he be so strong? Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene, especially the spirits of all living things, who were trembling with fear. Heavenly Dragon! Heavenly Dragon's might. The aura of an Empyrean godhead. The surrounding cultivators couldn't recognize what kind of ferocious beast Chen Hao's mount was. It looked like a dragon, but it was very different from the dragons they knew. However, the spirits of all living things present could recognize it. The Heavenly Dragon's might, moreover, it was a reincarnated spirit of all living things, which had already scared many spirits of all living things out of their wits. Not to mention, the aura of an Empyrean godhead also emerged from Chen Hao's forehead. This aura was definitely stronger than Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling's. The reason was simple: Chen Hao's Empyrean godhead had been fully activated, which meant it was fully awakened. Whereas Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling had not fully activated their Empyrean godhead, so how could they bear to do so? Fully activating their Empyrean godhead meant returning to their previous path. In this life, at most, they would return to their previous life's peak. That was not what they wanted. Madman? Is it really an Empyrean-level spirit of all living things? Fully activating their Empyrean godhead, so ruthless? Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling were aghast. At this moment, they were already vaguely regretting that they had provoked such a lunatic. Chapter 1502. Every time the spear light flashed, a spirit of all things flesh and blood would fly, and then it would be swallowed by the heavenly dragon mount along with its godhead. Under the terrifying pressure of the heavenly venerable godhead, ordinary spirits of all things were no match for it. Don't kill me, I admit defeat, I'm willing to sign the contract. It's too late. What answered them was Chen Hao's cold, merciless, and murderous voice. The god of slaughter Chen Hao, countless cultivators, especially those who had never seen god of slaughter Chen Hao's methods with their own eyes, personally experienced the terror of the title, God of Slaughter, at this moment. They were high and mighty spirits of all things, existences that were treated like treasures by any force, but now they were like cheap cabbages being ruthlessly trampled by God of Slaughter Chen Hao. Brilliant spear light filled the entire arena, reaping the lives of the spirits of all things, but everyone present, even the reincarnated heavenly venerable Lu Tianyan and Tuo Ling, didn't know what kind of divine ability Chen Hao had used. The only thing they could feel was the aura of the great Tao, a kind of Tao aura that made heaven and earth pale in comparison, domineering and invincible. Whether it was those who begged for mercy or those who wanted to escape the arena, without exception, they were all pierced by God of Slaughter Chen Hao's spear. Ruthless cult. Only kill. In a short time, there were only 3 spirits of all things left: Lu Tianyan, Shen Tuoling, and Su Wenxing. However, the 3 of them were able to stay, not because they could withstand Chen Hao's terrifying attack, but because from beginning to end, God of Slaughter Chen Hao hadn't taken the 3 of them as hunting targets. To be precise, Chen Hao hadn't attacked them yet. It was more exciting to leave the boss for last. Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling's expressions were very ugly and solemn. They thought that God of Slaughter Chen Hao wasn't simple, otherwise, they wouldn't have joined forces. After all, no matter how dignified the reason was, it was still bullying with numbers. But they didn't expect him to be so powerful. Nearly 300 spirits of all creation had been killed in such a short period of time. This was something that the 2 of them could never have done. Su Wenxing was relatively calm. What are you hesitating for? If this goes on, we'll all die. Awaken. Activate your godhead completely. Only by doing so can you kill it. Lu Tianyan roared. Boom. At the same time, he took the initiative to fully activate his godhead. The terrifying strength displayed by the God of Slaughter Chen Hao had made him understand that there was no way out. He could only fight to the death. God of Slaughter Chen Hao's fully awakened heavenly venerable godhead wasn't something that ordinary spirits could resist. Even Chen Hao and Shen Tuoling couldn't resist Chen Hao's attack before fully activating their heavenly venerable godhead. What's more, the god of slaughter Chen Hao was riding the heavenly dragon mount, an existence not inferior to a celestial venerable. Let's fight. Boom. Shen Tuoling also activated his godhead with all his might. Su Wenxing instead retreated with a calm expression, and he stared at god of slaughter Chen Hao, Lu Tianyan, and Shen Tuoling, and he acted as if he was going to wait and see. Su Wenxing, what do you mean? Lu Tianyan, Shen Tuoling, and the others said unhappily. They had fully awakened their godheads. How could they let others enjoy the fruits of their labor? It was necessary to activate their godheads. Do you want to die? Quickly awaken. If you want to give up the second path, everyone should give up. Otherwise, there's no need for god of slaughter Chen Hao to make a move. The two of us will kill you first. Shen Tuoling shouted angrily. They could also feel that although Su Wenxing's godhead wasn't at the heavenly venerable rank, it was still one of the best among the spirits of all living beings. If it fully awakened, it would still be helpful to them. Of course, the most important thing was that they didn't want someone to benefit from it. Su Wenxing frowned slightly. He glanced at Shen Tuoling and said, "It's just a second-rate heavenly venerable and a mediocre heavenly dragon. It's not to the point that I, Su Wenxing, give up the second path. Are you sure you want to fight me? I don't mind killing you first, then I'll fight with god of slaughter Chen Hao." What? Su Wenxing's words shocked everyone. What surprised them even more was that the aura around Su Wenxing's body rose several times as he spoke. Even Chen Hao, who had temporarily stopped killing, was slightly stunned. I actually misjudged. Chen Hao had long seen that Su Wenxing was the strongest among the 16 spirits of all living beings, but it was only in the human race. Compared to the reincarnated heavenly venerables, Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling, he was far inferior. But at this moment, Su Wenxing's aura, the aura of pure strength, had actually reached the point where even Chen Hao was shocked. Alright, this is a little interesting. Right now, Chen Hao was only controlling Gu Xian's heavenly venerable godhead. He, who had awakened his own inheritance, had already integrated its profundity into his Tao, the Tao of this life. He was many times stronger than when he was in the great world of Xiandi. Not to mention the spirits of all living beings, even Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling couldn't arouse Chen Hao's interest. How is this possible? Lu Tianyan and Shen Tuoling were shocked. At this moment, the aura Su Wenxing was emitting was already much stronger than the two of them. If he fully activated his godhead, what kind of concept would that be? I admit defeat. Swish. Lu Tianyan almost didn't hesitate. At the same time he spoke, he madly wanted to charge out of the stage with his strongest strength and fastest speed. Su Wenxing's sudden outburst made him understand that the final victor belonged to the human race. If it wasn't god of slaughter Chen Hao, it would be Su Wenxing. It was impossible for him and Shen Tuoling to have a share. Continue to fight foolishly? That was simply a dead end. Too late. Swish. It was still that cold, merciless voice filled with killing intent. It was still the same blood-red spear light. It was still, without exception, the spear exploded the head, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. It was still the same, the heavenly dragon mount swallowed, but the difference was that this spear killed Lu Tianyan, who had fully awakened his heavenly venerable godhead. No one could describe how terrifying this spear strike was. To be more precise, in the eyes of most people, this spear strike was no different from the previous one. But the heavenly venerable godhead, who was in everyone's mind, had died so easily. At this moment, Su Wenxing's calm expression also showed a trace of seriousness because of god of slaughter Chen Hao's spear strike. However, after the seriousness, there was even more excitement. Swish. Without the slightest sign, Su Wenxing suddenly vanished on the spot, causing the hearts of everyone to jerk. Obviously, as far as everyone was concerned, the true peak battle was about to arrive. The battle between Su Wenxing, who concealed himself extremely deeply, and the god of slaughter, Chen Hao. But what surprised everyone was that god of slaughter Chen Hao stood on the spot without moving, and even his aura didn't fluctuate in the slightest. Ah! Soon after, a shrill scream sounded, and everyone saw a shocking scene. Su Wenxing's hand was strangling the neck of the terrified Shen Tuoling. Chapter 1503. It was like Qin Shi was holding up a little chick. No matter how Chen Tuoling struggled and shouted, it was completely useless. A strand of terrifying and profound laws of the Tao completely restrained him like a steel bar, and even his godhead was unable to escape. After a while, Shen Tuoling's vitality completely disappeared, and he turned into an abnormally shriveled corpse. All his essence, energy, vitality, and blood qi had been devoured. The taste is barely passable. Su Wenxing smiled and casually threw Shen Tuoling's dried corpse on the ground. His smile was full of bloodthirst. All the hindrances have been eliminated. I didn't expect you to be Qin Hao, the god of slaughter. You were able to appear beside me without me noticing. You are indeed not simple. Su Wenxing stared at Qin Hao, and his eyes became brighter and brighter. You were able to hide from my perception. You are not simple either. Chen Hao also smiled. His pitch-black eyes were surging with fighting spirit, and like Su Wenxing, they became dazzling. Fighting spirit, an incomparably powerful fighting spirit, instantly formed hurricanes around the two of them. An overwhelming pressure also spread between the heavens and the earth. At this moment, all the cultivators in the martial arts practice field held their breaths. Before this, no one thought that Su Wenxing had hidden so much and was so powerful that even a heavenly master-level spirit of all things could not withstand a single blow. Therefore, now everyone was very sure that the battle between him and Qin Hao, the god of slaughter, would definitely be a top battle. It could no longer be measured by their own realms. Even their absolute power was completely beyond the shackles of realms. This was because what they attracted was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and the billowing immortal qi from the ninth heaven, which reduced the influence of their own strength to a negligible level. Of course, it did not mean that the two of them had completely transcended the shackles of realms. That was impossible. Otherwise, what was there to be afraid of even in the great world of Xiandi and the Star River King, not to mention the chaotic universe? Their realms determined the amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth that they could attract. This could not be changed. Boom, 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 boom. Su Wenxing made his move when the battle intent and pressure of the two clashed and exploded with terrifying fluctuations. Su Wenxing unleashed a move. Sword qi filled the sky as boundless Taoist rhythms transformed into swords of heaven and earth. The might of a celestial lord was vast and mighty. Strand after strand of swords descended from the 9 heavens and the 10 earths. It was like a river of life that could devour all living things and extinguish the vitality of the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Just this aura alone was enough to make people tremble in fear. They didn't even dare to think of resisting and could only allow themselves to be slaughtered. The heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. The sun set and the moon sank. The might of a single sword caused yin and yang to collapse and order to collapse. Who could stop it? Countless people turned pale with fright. Even Yi Lan, Huyan Aobua and Buttface, who had absolute trust in Qin Hao, Yang Fan, Li Yifeng, and I Jian Pain, Dong Fang Jun, and other original brothers and sisters of Chen Hao in the crowd, as well as the people who were sensing the outside world through Chen Hao's mind, were all worried for Chen Hao at this moment. In the face of this shocking sword, Chen Hao's pupils constricted. He opened his heaven eye between his eyebrows. In the depths of his 3 pitch-black eyes, especially in the heaven eye, there seemed to be countless pictures flashing rapidly. Those were complicated divine inscriptions that were flowing. They quickly combined, separated, combined, and separated again, carrying out complicated deductions. It's useless. This is the combination of my second great Tao and my first great Tao. My newest great Tao, even though it hasn't really taken shape yet, even the reborn Celestial Emperor might not be able to see through it, especially in such a short time. Haha. The Celestial Emperor. Even the reborn Celestial Emperor couldn't see through it. How confident, how arrogant, and how arrogant was he? Who was the Celestial Emperor? He was the most powerful person in the celestial realm, a supreme existence. He carried the mandate of heaven and controlled all the worlds. No one dared to disobey him in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. He was a truly invincible existence, the existence at the peak of the Tao, and the only existence. In the midst of Su Wenxing's complacent laughter, at the last moment when the heaven-defying sword was about to land on Chen Hao's body, Chen Hao's pitch-black eyes suddenly focused, and he finally made his move. Spear radiance. Endless Taoist principles, endless celestial qi, and majestic power gushed out and condensed into a spear radiance at the fastest speed, suddenly meeting the attack. Clang. Rumble. At this moment, it was as if the endless Milky Way had collided. Countless stars collapsed, splashing out rays of dazzling and terrifying celestial light. Strands of appalling great Tao aura broke through the seal of the arena and shot into the depths of the 9 heavens, illuminating the endless starry sky. Buzz. At this moment, the sky seemed to have really been broken. Endless celestial qi rolled in from the 9 heavens, as if the Milky Way had fallen from the 9 heavens. It quickly gathered in the void, and in an instant, it covered the sky and the sun. At the same time, a vast and terrifying pressure poured down, causing all the creatures in the entire great thousand worlds of ancient chaos, no matter where they were, to look up at the sky in extreme horror. With just a glance, they all prostrated themselves on the ground, as if doomsday had arrived. Even the people in Chen Hao's mind space were no exception. Heaven-defying? As expected, God of killing Chen Hao, you are indeed very good. Although you didn't see through my Tao, you should be proud that you were able to withstand my attack. Now, I give you 2 choices. First, pledge your loyalty to me. In the future, you will be in existence second only to one in the celestial realm. In this life, the one who will bear the mandate of heaven must be me, Su Wenxing. Second, those who block my Tao, no matter who it is, even if it is the reborn celestial emperor, must die. Su Wenxing looked at Chen Hao, who was bathed in blood and had obviously been severely injured by him, and said disdainfully. His words caused the heaven and earth to shake, and the heaven-defying tribulation clouds and terrifying pressure suddenly became stronger. Obviously, Su Wenxing's words were not only looking down on God of killing Chen Hao, but also on heaven and earth. I haven't experienced the feeling of being injured for a long time. This feeling is really good. Chen Hao's pitch-black eyes fell straight on Su Wenxing's face, who was unscathed. His thumb swiped across his cheek and wiped the blood into his mouth. He tasted the taste of the blood and said softly, I also give you 2 choices. First, self-destruct. Second, I will do it. Of course, if you have a stronger Tao, just pretend I didn't say anything, and let's continue. Above the 9 heavens, under the endless immortal qi and the terrifying pressure that made everyone submit, the 2 of them were not affected at all. Moreover, neither of them cared about the tribulation clouds that were rapidly forming in the void. The heaven-defying tribulation clouds. That was a tribulation cloud that exceeded the knowledge of everyone present, and it made everyone kneel on the ground and submit to it. Only in this way could they not be restrained and hurt by the pressure. Even Yi Lan, who was at the true immortal king realm, was no exception. This made Yi Lan, some experts, and the remaining spirits of all living things of the human race know that Su Wenxing and Chen Hao were heaven-defying. They were not only defying the heavens of the ancient chaos great thousand world, but also the heavens of the celestial realm. Chapter 1504. Since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then go to hell. Su Wenxing roared and slashed with his sword. In an instant, a more terrifying Taoist rhyme and celestial master pressure gushed out and condensed into the heavenly sword light, tearing the void apart. Swish. Boom. At this moment, even the tribulation clouds that were rapidly forming up in the void began to tremble violently under the might of Su Wenxing's sword. It was like a raging tsunami that brought forth countless streams of immortal qi that gushed out in a single line. They were all devoured by the sword light and strengthened. Such a scene made everyone turn pale with fright. Seizing the power of heaven's punishment. Any heaven's punishment would borrow the power of all things in the world and gather the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to form the tribulation clouds. It was good enough that the tribulation clouds did not devour the cultivator's energy. How could anyone seize the power of heaven's punishment? This was simply too crazy. Swish. At this moment, Chenhao also attacked. Instantly, the Overlord's spear pointed out and dazzling spear flowers floated out to meet Su Wenxing's sword light. Flowers! At this moment, the people who were prostrating on the ground felt that their hearts and minds were captured by Chenhao's spear flowers. They were so enchanting and beautiful, like the most beautiful scenery and the most beautiful woman in the world. With just one glance, they could no longer take their eyes off her. Wasn't that their first love who had passed away? Wasn't that the woman they loved the most but couldn't get? Wasn't that the Prince Charming whom they pursued so hard but failed to get? Wasn't that the child they loved the most but died prematurely? Different scenes appeared in the hearts of different people. Those were the most beautiful memories in their hearts, but also their biggest regrets, regrets that could never be made up for in their lives. Just like that, it quietly grew in the hearts of the cultivators, and then it rippled out. It was as if they saw the most beautiful person and the most beautiful thing in the past. They were immersed in the moment when they were the most moved. They forgot everything, including themselves. The world of mortals flowed into their hearts. Is it you? Is it really you? You're finally back, you're back? Yi Lan looked at the void and tears flowed down his face. It was as if he saw the woman he loved the most in his life and his most beloved daughter. He, who was already a true immortal king, was actually lost under Chenhao's spear flowers. And he just took a glance. How much impact did Su Wenxing, who bore the brunt of Chenhao's attack, suffer? Su Wenxing, who was the reincarnation of a top celestial master, was stunned when he saw the flowers of spear flowers blossoming from Chenhao's spear light. Beautiful. It was an indescribable beauty, but it was also a poignant beauty, and also an indescribable pain. He saw himself in the past, a man who looked down upon the world and traversed the starry sky. He was only one step away from shouldering the mandate of heaven, commanding the myriad of worlds, and being the only one in the world. He also saw himself unable to extricate himself with a single glance. He swore to obtain her, but just as he was about to obtain her by hook or by crook, she threw herself into the arms of his lifelong enemy. After losing her, he lost everything, including the chance to carry the mandate of heaven. He didn't hesitate to provoke the great war of the 3 Daos, and even the war of the 10,000 realms. However, in the end, the Tao of the heavens was destroyed, and the endless cycle of reincarnation began. It was at that time that he understood that the Emperor of Heaven was not the pinnacle of cultivation, and that the immortal world was not the end of cultivation. Perhaps it was just a new beginning, a new beginning. Now he was awake. After a short period of sluggishness, he also woke up. It was still that resplendent spear flower, the flower of fate, the Tao of fate. It's you! When Su Wenxing woke up, his face became abnormally twisted. I should have guessed that it was you. Who in this world can go against me? Even if I reincarnate, there will only be you. Fate, karma, it is inevitable that we will meet again. An endless amount of immortal light soared into the sky. An indescribably powerful space-time essence appeared out of thin air, making it seem like time had stopped. Even the terrifying attacks launched by Su Wenxing and Chenhao seemed to have stopped. Who is it? Chenhao was slightly surprised. He was surprised that the other party had already mastered the laws of space-time to the finest extent. This was because their attacks had already been imbued with at least 10,000 times the space-time essence. The attacks that were originally going to meet in an instant were forcibly delayed by 10,000 times before they could meet. At the same time, Chenhao was also curious that the other party seemed to have recognized him. Who was it? Chenhao also did not know who he used to be. Do you think you can still hide from me when your mastery of emotions and desires has reached such a level? Other than you, who else can combine the flowers of 7 emotions and 6 desires? Lord Celestial Emperor? Su Wenxing shouted in a mocking tone, but his eyes were filled with monstrous hatred. Lord Celestial Emperor? Chenhao was taken aback. Walla, The cultivators who were prostrating themselves in the martial arts practice field all sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at Killer God Chen Hao. Lord Celestial Emperor. Killer God Chen Hao is the Lord Celestial Emperor? No wonder, no wonder. Bearing the mandate of heaven, I am supreme. That is a truly invincible existence in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Boss is the Lord Celestial Emperor. Ha! Lord Celestial Emperor, Lord Celestial Emperor. The cultivators in the vast universe star system and other star systems who persisted in supporting Killer God Chen Hao and believed in Killer God Chen Hao were all inexplicably excited. Was there a more powerful existence than the Lord Celestial Emperor? At this moment, Chen Hao's believers became even more devout. This kind of unreserved faith gave their hearts the safest sustenance, and they became even more tranquil and serene. Their state of mind was also sublimated and transformed. Am I really the Lord Celestial Emperor? Chen Hao asked himself, but he did not have an answer. What he had awakened was only the inheritance of an absolute art. Moreover, it was a passive awakening that triggered a similar absolute art in his mind. As for his past memories, there was not a shred of them. How did he know who he was? That shouldn't be it. Chen Hao thought back to what Yang Lian had said to him. If he was the reincarnation of an immortal emperor, how could Yang Lian not know? How could she not mention it at all? She only said that his soul had fused and mutated. However, he could not be completely sure that he was not the Lord Celestial Emperor. The Tao that I just used was also a Tao that I deduced from the Red Dust Heart Sutra and thousands of runes. It was definitely not awakened. Otherwise, how could I not be able to defeat him in the first blow and be seriously injured? Maybe it was just a coincidence. Chen Hao threw away the surprise in his heart. Who is the Lord Celestial Emperor? I don't know him, nor am I interested in knowing. I don't think it has anything to do with me. I only know that I am Chen Hao, the person who will kill you. As Chen Hao spoke, he held the spear in one hand while his other hand rapidly formed hand seals. Profound talisman markings that contained the laws of space and time gently condensed at the tip of his finger like numerous dazzling stars. After that, he pointed out with his finger. 9-star alignment. Chapter 1505. Boom. In an instant, it was as if 9 stars had penetrated Su Wenxing's space-time ultimacy. The space burst like a colorful bubble. The spear flower and the heavenly sword, which seemed to be in slow motion, suddenly lost the support of the space-time ultimacy. Their speed returned to normal, and they violently attacked. You haven't awakened your memory? That's right. The aura of this godhead is obviously the godhead of a second-rate celestial master that you're controlling. It's the same as the sky dragon, right? In my previous life, I wasn't any worse than you, but you were lucky enough to get her, causing me to fall into a demonic trap. In this life, I'll take back everything that belongs to me. That Su Wenxing didn't stop Chen Hao from breaking the space-time seal that he had condensed. Instead, he crazily urged his attack. Boom! The spear flower and the sword radiance crashed into each other, and a terrifying explosion resounded throughout the world. Around the training field, countless palaces collapsed. All the cultivators who were prostrating on the ground cried out in alarm, afraid that they would be affected by the raging energy shockwaves. It must be known that even the shockwaves were not something that everyone present could withstand. Fortunately, the masters of the major galaxies and the top experts of the cutting path perfected immortal realm had all stepped in to help. They formed a powerful protective barrier in front of the crowd, which prevented serious damage. Rumble. The light of the heavenly sword soared into the sky as if a celestial master had personally arrived. The strongest celestial master's aura surged out, and it was many times stronger than Gu Xian's and Su Juanfeng's celestial master's aura. It was just like the genius disciples of the ancient chaos Great Thousand World and the genius disciples of the great world of Xiandi. They were on completely different levels. Suddenly, a soft sound rang out clearly in the midst of the terrifying explosion. It was extremely strange. The heavenly sword that was clearly capable of devouring everything was easily pierced through by the most enchanting spear flower. There was no terrifying explosion, but immediately after, it was as if a chain reaction occurred. The incomparably huge heavenly sword only dimmed a little even when the spear flowers collided. The heavenly sword that did not lose its momentum actually began to rapidly collapse at the point where the spear flowers pierced through it. Like a dike of 1,000 li being destroyed by an ant's nest. Su Wenxing was shocked. He, who was in the Daluo Golden Wonderland, had originally thought that he would be able to comprehend a new Dao and merge it with the supreme Dao of his previous life. He had definitely achieved a level that no one had ever achieved before, and no one would be able to surpass him in the future. Even if the god of massacre Chen Hao used the original flower of 7 emotions and 6 desires, he would definitely not be able to break through it. But now, it had been broken. How could it be possible for it to break without any warning? Immediately after, there was another sound. The beautiful spear seemed to be moving slowly, but in fact, it had transcended the restraints of time and space. In an instant, it pierced through Su Wenxing's knee, causing him to kneel down. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The bewitching flower broke the space-time seal, detonated the heavenly sword, and pierced through the kneecap. It was all done in one go and nothing could stop it. At that instant, the terrifying heaven-defying tribulation finally descended. Thick bolts of lightning struck down from the sky, attacking the god of slaughter Chen Hao and Su Wenxing. Pooh! Su Wenxing suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Instead of being shocked, he was overjoyed. Good timing, the heavens are on my side. After saying that, he got up with great difficulty. With a boom, his essence, energy, and spirit burst out like an ocean. He opened his arms as if he wanted to embrace the lightning that carried the supreme Tao of the immortal world and could destroy all things in the world. Rumble! In an instant, his body was submerged in endless lightning. At the same time, Chen Hao also completely opened himself up, allowing the heavenly punishment to descend upon him. Heavenly punishment. After stepping into the Daluo Golden Wonderland, Chen Hao had triggered the heaven-defying tribulations several times. This time, it was undoubtedly the most powerful one. Naturally, for the freakish Chen Hao, it was also the best opportunity to temper himself. It had to be said that a battle with an expert was indeed the best way to temper oneself. Without Su Wenxing, Chen Hao would not have been able to progress further on his Dao in the Daluo Golden Wonderland. He would not have had the opportunity to defy the heavens again. Moreover, both of them had triggered the heaven-defying tribulation. Heaven-defying tribulation, heaven-defying tribulation, heaven-defying tribulation. After the heaven-defying tribulation, I'd like to see how you're going to fight me. Devour. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In the endless lightning, not only did Su Wenxing open himself up to the lightning to temper his body and mind, but he also opened his mouth and devoured the endless lightning power like a Kuan Peng swallowing the sky. This was his Tao. There was nothing in the world that he could not devour. By devouring an expert, he could obtain the energy of that expert. By devouring lightning, he could obtain the power of lightning. It had to be said that this was an extremely freakish Tao. If he could comprehend the energy he devoured, it would truly become his own strength. He was already clear about this point when the tribulation clouds of heavenly punishment began to gather. Heavenly punishment would also be one of his trump cards. However, until the moment before, he did not think that he would use the power of heavenly punishment to deal with Chen Hao. He alone was enough. Why wait until heavenly punishment is over? I suddenly have a new idea. Killing you is simply too easy. Open your soul palace and pledge your loyalty to me. Perhaps I can spare your life. Contrary to Su Wenxing's and everyone else's expectations, God of Slaughter Chen Hao actually walked towards Su Wenxing amidst the endless lightning. Whether it was the physical body, the mind, or the soul, the terrifying lightning contained a terrifying attack. However, Chen Hao, who was clearly completely open and facing the heavenly punishment head-on, walked calmly and elegantly amidst the endless lightning, as if it was nothing at all. Every lightning that landed on his body seemed to have directly entered his body. There was no need for him to devour them individually. Su Wenxing felt as if his throat had been crushed, and he could no longer laugh. Besides the terrifying sound of thunder, everyone was silent. Even Yi Lan, who was at the true immortal king realm, had lost the ability to move. The heaven-defying heavenly punishment of the immortal world did not target them, nor did it strike them. However, when the heavenly punishment completely descended at such a close distance, it was not something they could resist. At this moment, the only thing left was their thoughts. Dream on. After the shock, Su Wenxing was furious. He could not be bothered to use heavenly punishment to temper his body. He suddenly gathered his energy, and the speed at which he devoured the lightning instantly increased by several times. Is that so? Chen Hao suddenly took a step forward quickly. He actually arrived above Su Wenxing in an instant and stomped down. Boom! Su Wenxing did not have time to react at all. The foot that was as heavy as a star and contained endless lightning and terrifying Dao laws forcefully stomped down on Su Wenxing. Su Wenxing roared furiously. His entire body trembled violently, and sweat poured down like rain. Blood was squeezed out from every pore of his body due to the terrifying pressure. He who was originally heavily injured was holding on with all his might. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. Bang! His body was still crushed in the end, but his soul core was directly restrained by Chen Hao, and it was sucked into the space between his brows along with his godhead. After that, Chen Hao directly sat down cross-legged in midair. He paid no attention to the shock of countless people as he directly started to receive the baptism of heavenly punishment. Chapter 1506. Is this really the heavenly punishment condensed from the supreme law of the immortal world? It's just so. The terrifying heavenly punishment did not pose much of a challenge to Chen Hao. Whether it was the physical body, the soul, or the state of mind, they were all within Chen Hao's tolerance range. He did not even have the ability to challenge the limits. This was beyond Chen Hao's expectations. After all, this was a heaven-defying heavenly punishment that connected the immortal world. It could be said to be the strongest heavenly punishment in this plane. This also means that my strength in the Daluo Golden Wonderland has already surpassed the strength of the supreme law in this realm. If I can continue to improve like this, will I be in existence that surpasses this starry sky plane? Perhaps. Thinking of this, Chen Hao thought of Yang Lian, whose real body had already left this starry sky plane. It was also Yang Liuyan's words that made Chen Hao realize that the immortal world and the thousands of worlds below it were not the end of a cultivator's journey. There was no end to the Tao. At least, Chen Hao still could not see the end and did not know where the end was. Killing God Chen Hao. Killing God Chen Hao. The heavenly punishment stopped and the tribulation clouds dissipated. After being freed from the pressure of the heavenly punishment and regaining their freedom, the believers of Death God Chen Hao began to excitedly cheer. The words Death God Chen Hao once again resounded through the heavens and earth, resounding through the entire ancient chaos. This time, it was incomparably firm and did not waver in the slightest. When Yi Lan handed the ancient chaos order to Chen Hao, he did not decline and directly refined and controlled the ancient chaos order. Without needing Chen Hao to force them, the rulers of the 9 major galaxies, the tyrants, the Protoss, the Zergs, and the other ancient chaos counselors, took the initiative to declare their allegiance and open their soul dwellings to let Chen Hao plant the seeds of faith. Similarly, more than 10 spirits of all creation from the human race were no exception. The entire ancient chaos became one voice, the voice of the killing god Chen Hao. It was a powerful and domineering voice. At this moment, Chen Hao was no longer the Chen Hao of the past. After experiencing the great world of Xiandi, he was ready to step into the 10-direction domain and advance to a higher realm. He didn't want to be distracted by ancient chaos. Therefore, he couldn't be soft-hearted. He had to firmly control everything about ancient chaos. That was the best choice. 3 days later, Si Xian, Qinan, Pan Long, Du Jing, Qin Ling, Ito Tai, Pan Dong Lu, and the others who had entered the Grandmist Supremacy realm, under the leadership of Ruo Lan and Ruo Xian, stepped into the ancient Chaos Void realm and began their training in the ancient Chaos Boundless world. As for Chen Hao, Chen Shui, Heli and Wuzi, Xia Yu, and the other girls, as well as Miao Xian, Wan Yishui, and Xue Fian, as well as Qin Yang, Ning Jing, Ao Qian, Ling Feng, and the other Daluo Jingxian, they all stepped into the ancient chaos boundless world's Shifeng region, which was also the Hongming region. Wan Qinglan had drifted in the chaotic space for more than 1,000 years, experiencing countless frightening spatial storms. Especially the last one, when Wan Qinglan thought that she was dead for sure, because not only had her physical body, even her soul had been destroyed. She only remembered that at the moment of death, her mind was filled with his figure. That was her demon, her obsession. It was also at the moment of her death that she seemed to have comprehended the mysteries of heaven. She saw him and clearly felt his aura. Although there had been a great change, the original perception brought about by the physical contact between them had not changed in the slightest. Therefore, she, who had already turned into nothingness, or perhaps only a strand of consciousness, seemed to have grasped at a life-saving straw. She desperately moved forward, desperately approaching him. Finally, when she felt that she had entered the range of his aura, she was perfectly satisfied and fell into the endless darkness without any regrets. Perhaps it was just an illusion on the verge of death? She knew in her heart, but she would rather believe that it was real. Therefore, she died very peacefully. Her whole life, she only wanted to reach the peak of martial arts. Even if she got close to him, it was only for the sake of reaching the peak of martial arts. She had never thought that Dao companions needed true feelings. In her opinion, it was just a combination of relying on each other for their own cultivation. However, when she walked together with him, even when yin and yang had not yet intertwined, she began to doubt her previous thoughts. People were afraid that they would fall in love. And when she truly and completely belonged to him, but he could not stop her from leaving, she understood her own heart even more clearly. In life, she was his person. In death, he was her ghost. No matter what, no matter how difficult it was, she wanted to find him and become her obsession, a goal that was higher than the peak of martial arts. And now, death had come. Even if it was just an illusion brought about by her own obsession, she was satisfied. Once again, she felt that familiar aura, merged with that familiar aura, fell into the darkness at this moment, as if she was frozen in his embrace, and became eternal. Wasn't this the most beautiful ending that she had been pursuing? But, why am I awake? Where is this? Such dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth, such powerful laws of heaven and earth. But why am I like this? Nguyen Tan Lan slowly woke up. All her memories were still there, and she was still in the state that she was in when she fell into the endless darkness. However, the scene that she saw and the aura that she felt surprised her. But what surprised her even more was that she was actually a speck that existed between heaven and earth. If she did not have a sense of her own body, she would definitely not have been able to discover herself. I'm already dead. But my consciousness, why didn't it disappear? Why did it come to such a powerful world? Is this the legendary the great world of Xiandi? Nguyen Tan Lan realized that other than her consciousness and senses, she did not have a single shred of strength. The only thing she could do was to look at herself, drifting uncontrollably between heaven and earth. His aura. It's his aura. Spirit Spring, it's all Spirit Spring. What a huge tree. Nguyen Tan Lan, who was drifting with the wind, suddenly saw an azure body of water. It was like the sea that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was also at this moment that she sensed an aura that made her excited and surprised. It was Qin Hao's aura. What made her even more surprised was that the azure body of water that stretched as far as the eye could see was actually a high-grade spirit spring that she could not imagine. In the center of the body of water, there were two intertwined trees that reached straight to the 9 heavens. They contained an extremely clear aura that belonged to him. But, is it you? Is it really you? Nguyen Tan Lan shouted excitedly. Unfortunately, she was only a speck of dust. She was only a wisp of consciousness and could not make any sound at all. This is the tree of life. Ah, this is the Tao manifestation immortal fruit tree. But aren't these Tao laws taught to me by him? It's him. I remember now. One of the top 10 evildoers, Zhou Qinglong, once gave him the seed of the tree of life. Could it be that he cultivated this? Nguyen Thanh Lan was pleasantly surprised. However, she did not know that the world she appeared in was in the mind of Chen Hao, who had tempered the prototype of a great world to near perfection in the ancient chaos Hongmeng domain. He was about to become a true great world. Similarly, Chen Hao did not know that the great world in his mind had such an amazing ability to create a world of its own. Chapter 1507. Unfortunately, Chen Hao could not sense the existence of Nguyen Thanh Lan at all. In fact, Nguyen Thanh Lan's current state was just wandering between heaven and earth. Her life imprint had yet to form, so she could not be considered an existence at all. Just as Yang Luoyan had predicted, Nguyen Thanh Lan would be sucked in by the immortal boundary stone. Moreover, Nguyen Thanh Lan could not withstand the test of the immortal boundary stone, and her body and soul were destroyed. However, at the moment of her destruction, because of the obsession in her heart, she sensed the secrets of heaven and captured Chen Hao's aura. Thus, her remaining obsession grabbed Chen Hao, this life-saving straw, and merged into Chen Hao's body in the magical immortal boundary stone. Under such circumstances, she should have fallen into the 6 paths of reincarnation and entered a greater world. However, at this moment, she had reincarnated into Chen Hao's greater world in his mind. What did this mean? Chen Hao's embryonic greater world in his mind had already formed a world of its own. It truly had the ability to carry all things in the greater world and nurture life. Even a celestial venerable did not have this ability, let alone Daluo Jingxian, who was countless realms lower. Even Yang Luoyan would be shocked if she knew. Ancient chaos greater world, Hongmeng domain. Chen Hao sat cross-legged on a mountain peak in the deepest part of the Hongmeng domain. He was inhaling clouds and exhaling fog, like a dragon sucking in water. He was constantly devouring a huge amount of Hongmeng Qi. Hongmeng Qi only existed in the Hongmeng domain, and the Hongmeng domain existed in any greater world, including the celestial realm. All the Milky Way tunnels were connected to the Hongmeng domain. It could be said that the Hongmeng domain was the most important existence in every greater world. Phew! My embryonic greater world is close to the perfect state that I can achieve. It's their turn. Chen Hao opened his eyes and heaved a long sigh of relief. A slightly evil smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. 1,000 years had passed. Even though Chen Hao had once stayed in the Hongmeng domain of the chaotic universe and obtained the mark of the macro world, Chen Hao had to start from scratch in the Hongmeng domain of the chaotic universe. He had used the mark of the macro world that belonged to the Hongmeng domain of the ancient chaos universe. Until now, it had taken him a whole 1,000 years. Who should I get first? In Chen Hao's mind, the figure of an outstanding woman appeared. It was a bit difficult for him to make a choice. He, who had awakened the unique skill inheritance, state of mind, and willpower, had thought that he was no longer as interested in things like sex as he used to be. But now he, who was really going to combine yin and yang to help the girls perfect the prototype of the macro world, found that he was still inexplicably excited. He couldn't have been more excited before he started. Let's draw lots. That's the fairest way, hee. Chen Hao's mind moved, and the bamboo sticks that represented the girls flew in front of him and spun rapidly around him. Since Chen Hao was going to draw lots, he naturally wouldn't cheat, nor would he use his mind to sense. He closed his eyes and drew the first stick. It's your turn to start. A wisp of Chen Hao's mind suddenly broke through the air. Not long after, a graceful figure stepped out of the space-time gate and came to Chen Hao's side shyly. I've said, let them go first. It's fair to draw lots. You're the first one to be drawn. Chen Hao smiled and held the graceful and slender waist. Under the faint immortal light, the fluttering skirt shone with a blue light that made Chen Hao excited. Chen Hao thought of the time when they were on the Wuji star. When they came out of the 9 Netherfrost pool, they were almost together, but unfortunately, they were stopped by Master Han Mei. Unexpectedly, tens of thousands of years had passed in a flash. This tug of war, for mortals, was thousands of reincarnations. Finally, I can cure your illness, You're the one who's sick. How for the first time? I don't want to cultivate. Do I need you to tell me that? Feeling Chen Hao's gentle and hot kiss, his strong and powerful arms, and his warm and safe chest, Chen Shui, who hadn't been so close for many years, couldn't help but shed tears of happiness. This was a true Taoist companion, wasn't it? She really wanted to slow down time and make this moment eternal. Love was selfish. Everyone wanted to have it alone and completely belong to them. But Chen Shui knew that this was impossible for Chen Hao. Since she decided to follow him, she had to learn how to share. She was smart enough to understand this from the beginning. Therefore, until now, she was the most important woman in Chen Hao's heart. Her blue skirt slipped, and a spring breeze blew. Chen Shui finally became a real woman. There was no disappointment, only pride and happiness. Their strong physique and recovery ability made them hungry and thirsty. After countless firsts, they finally began to cultivate and easily entered a state of perfect harmony. Under the guidance of Chen Hao, Chen Shui began to condense the embryonic form of her own macro world. 100 years passed in a flash. After Chen Shui left, Chen Hao proceeded to draw lots for the second time, and for the third time in 100 years. He continued to draw lots one by one. Whether they had dual cultivated before or not, it was not important. What was important was that he had to help them refine the embryonic form of the great world. Chen Shaoqing, Xiaomei, Tantai Lian, Hu Meinyang, Wan Yishui, Chenyan, Leng Ninghuan, Long Ting, Xiaoyu, Bailey Ningbing, Miao Xian. One by one, they appeared. The one that made Chen Hao feel a little conflicted was his former sister, Chen Yan. This was something that couldn't be helped. Chen Yan was different from Chen Shui. After all, Chen Hao had treated her as his sister since childhood. Although he had long accepted the fact that she was his woman, he still couldn't completely let go when it came to doing it. Chen Yan also couldn't let go. But of course, this was in the beginning. After the first time, she didn't feel that way. Next was the fierce sister Long Ting. This girl's fierceness wasn't just for show. In addition to her fierceness, Long Ting, who had returned to her original appearance, looked very similar to King Ying and the sleeping Yi Xian on earth. Cough cough, Chen Hao wasn't an evil person, but they were too similar. He couldn't help but have evil thoughts. It felt weird. Fortunately, Long Ting was heartless to a certain extent. The first time, she declared that she would use martial arts to conquer Chen Hao and let Chen Hao experience the power of a fierce woman. That was exciting. In the end, only 3 bamboo sticks floated around Chen Hao. Does Shui Fian want it or not? Although it's interesting, she hasn't made it clear. Let's not take it? No, since I've decided to take it, if I don't take it at this critical moment, the Grand Mist Supremacy realm will have a great impact. It can't be remedied. If she doesn't want it, I won't force her. In the end, Chen Hao didn't take out Shui Fian's signature. As for the other girl, Ning Jing, Chen Hao didn't even think about it. In his opinion, it was more suitable for Qingyang. Little Wu. It's finally your turn, hee. He casually pulled out a stick. It was Helian Wuzi, who had appeared after being called out 1,000 times. Chapter 1508. Helian Wuzi was one of the first to follow Chen Hao. She was also one of the women who moved Chen Hao the most. Chen Hao would always remember when he was the first to enter the cultivation world of the eastern continent. Helian Wuzi's face was full of tears as she frantically hit the teleportation barrier. Chen Hao was also very clear how difficult it was for her to give up her past in the endless cycle of reincarnation to choose this life in him. Her beautiful face was as cold as the moon, and her graceful and exquisite figure appeared in front of Chen Hao not long after. At this moment, she knew what was going to happen. Her originally cold face was as beautiful as a flower and exceptionally alluring. She was obviously shy, but she still looked straight into Chen Hao's eyes and did not avoid his gaze. I feel, little Wu. Tell me, what do you feel? I feel like I'm going to be separated from you again. How can that be? After becoming the supreme of Hongmeng, we will also enter the chaotic ancient chaos domain to train. We won't be separated again. Also, we should work harder in the immortal realm. I know, but I just have this feeling. Chen Hao pondered for a moment. Helian Wuzi's words could not be groundless. She, who was in the endless cycle of reincarnation, had experienced countless reincarnations. Since she had this feeling, it must be a sign. To a certain extent, she should have seen through the mysteries of heaven. Unfortunately, Chen Hao really could not think of how they would be separated. Could it be that little Wu had awakened something and had a new place to go? So, I want you to accompany me more. Maybe, something will happen to me. Chen Hao hurriedly responded. Obviously, he and Helian Wuzi had the same thought. Femme fatale, pink skeletons, gentle countryside, hero's mound, these were the words Chen Hao had said to Helian Wuzi. After so many years, Chen Hao, who had carefully walked step by step to where he was today, finally stepped into the gentle countryside that belonged to Helian Wuzi. Scenes of the past appeared in his mind. The things that he had experienced and the people that he had experienced also flashed through his mind. Chen Hao could not help but sigh in his heart. Even though this was the most beautiful moment, the only people who could follow him, or rather, the only ones who could keep up with him were his women. Mo Yui, Yang Fan, Li Feng, Ni Jian Pain, Dong Fong Jian, and the other former brothers had received his protection and care. Like Buttface, Huyan Aobua, and the others, they were also powerful cultivators in Proud Heaven. However, they couldn't keep up with his pace. There was an insurmountable gap between them. Chen Hao was clearly aware that even though he was still the boss in their hearts, it was more of reverence, respect, and faith. They didn't have the casualness and carefreeness of true brothers. This was an unavoidable and unchangeable fact. He could only let nature take its course. No. I'm afraid that I'll leave unexpectedly, so don't. Xiao Wu, not only do I want to be your Dao companion, but I also want to be your wife. How? Leave it to me. Chen Hao stared at Helian Wuzi's eyes that were filled with pleading. After a full half a minute, he finally nodded lightly. He didn't expect Helian Wuzi to have such a request. They didn't cultivate, but the last step, refining essence into qi, was necessary. After all, Chen Hao didn't plan to have children now. However, Helian Wuzi suddenly stopped him and refined his hundreds of millions of children. Chen Hao couldn't refuse. Even though he wasn't ready. Along with the increase of his comprehension and the improvement of his strength, Chen Hao felt that fate was unfathomable and the profundity and irresistible of the Heaven Dao. Just like himself, who knew when he would fully awaken and annihilate the current him? Therefore, Chen Hao couldn't underestimate Helian Wuzi's feeling. Moreover, he was powerless to stop that feeling from really happening. If he couldn't even satisfy this request of leaving, how could it be called love? 300 years passed in the blink of an eye. Although Helian Wuzi was reluctant, she could only temporarily leave Chen Hao and hand him over to the remaining women. For the last two, Chen Hao drew Xue Fian. What Chen Hao didn't expect was that Xue Fian didn't show the slightest objection. Instead, she was extremely shy. That was the so-called destined person that her master had divined for her. Although she didn't dare to think about it at first, after all, there was Si Xian. However, after experiencing all that, her heart had long been conquered by Chen Hao. However, she still didn't dare to think too much because Chen Hao had too many women and they were all too outstanding. Even Miao Xian, who had the Khanate Sword Emperor body, wasn't the most outstanding, let alone her. She didn't think that Chen Hao would accept her. She was also prepared to still be brothers and sisters with Chen Hao, just like Ao Qian and Ling Feng. However, she didn't expect that Chen Hao would actually summon her. How could she not be willing? Only a fool wouldn't be willing. In her opinion, no woman in the world could resist Chen Hao's charm. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years passed. The last one. Chen Hao looked at the remaining bamboo sticks and smiled slightly. At this moment, he was full of energy and spirit. The continuous fusion of yin and yang had also been nourished by several strands of primordial yin. It could be said that his body and mind had reached an unprecedented level of pleasure. When I helped them condense the embryonic form of the Great World, I didn't expect that it would also affect my embryonic form of the Great World. It has taken a step further and is truly close to perfection. Chen Hao thought to himself as he sensed the aura of the embryonic form of the great world. At this moment, he clearly felt that with just a thought, he could trigger the punishment of the great realm and step into the Grand Mist Supremacy realm. Phew. It's your turn, and you're still peeping? Come out. Ah? You? How do you know that I'm peeping? The light of nirvana. No light can escape my senses. Is it nice? Is it exciting? Do you feel anything? Chen Hao looked at the little nurse Lu Hui and asked with a devilish look. It's all within the normal range. Only Long Ting is a little stronger. However, there's nothing new about it. I can only say that it's barely passable. Awesome. Chen Hao was stunned and looked at the little nurse Lu Hui with a little surprise. However, he immediately understood. After all, the little nurse Lu Hui had grown up in a technological civilization. How could she not see porn? Even if she hadn't seen it before, the lives of the Sky River sector in the ancient Chaos Grand Thousand Worlds maintained their original civilization and began to cultivate. She could see it at any time. Since you're so awesome, let me see your martial arts. Okay, I'm not afraid of you. Come, let me help you undress. Lu Hui's face was flushed, but she pretended to be calm. This scene made Chen Hao laugh in his heart, but he was also looking forward to it. Lu Hui, the soul of all things, was also the only soul of all things among Chen Hao's women. No matter what, she was still the reincarnation of a female immortal emperor. Moreover, after seeing so many souls of all things, Chen Hao could conclude that Lu Hui was not an ordinary soul of all things. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to have the ability to trace the origin and resurrect a person whose body and soul had been destroyed in the Daluo Golden Wonderland. That was impossible. Secondly, the light of nirvana was not something that an ordinary soul of all things could use in the Daluo Golden Wonderland. Chapter 1509. Under Lu Hui's domineering and wild initiative, the two of them began. When their lips met again after countless years, Lu Hui, who felt as if it was her first kiss, melted once again. Her shyness gradually turned into passion, like a burning flame. Her passion and overflowing vitality once again moved Chen Hao. What kind of feelings were needed to have such intense passion? Love was like fire. Chen Hao fell into a deep and intoxicating kiss with Lu Hui. He forgot everything. It was as if they had returned to the time when their hearts and souls were truly intertwined. Whoosh! A hurricane arose, but the two of them were unaware. Tribulation clouds gathered, endless heaven and earth spirit chi, Hongmeng chi, and immortal chi that connected the 9 heavens and 10 lands gathered, but they were unaware. However, all the cultivators in the Hongmeng domain, especially the girls who came with Chen Hao, looked up at the sky. The girls rushed over immediately and sealed off Chen Hao and Lu Hui's surroundings. Is this also a mutation brought about by the fusion of the spirits of all living things? The girls looked in the direction of Chen Hao and thought to themselves. Helian Wuzi frowned slightly, as if she was deep in thought. Her heartbeat sped up uncontrollably, and the feeling that she had felt before became even more intense at this time. Could it be that the one who left was him and not me? Helian Wuzi muttered to herself. Unfortunately, even now, she did not have a clear feeling. The only thing she knew was that this was not something she could stop or control. Crack! Endless terrifying lightning bolts rolled down. Chen Hao and Lu Hui, who were deeply entangled, finally woke up when the lightning bolts were about to hit them. Divine punishment? Oh no. Why is it here? Lu Hui was also extremely shocked, but she wrapped herself tightly around Chen Hao like an octopus and did not relax at all. You're too forgetful. Girl, can you be any more passionate? I'm about to be melted by you. However, since I'm already here, let's continue. It's only heaven's punishment. Today I, God of Slaughter Chen Hao, will reach the peak of love with you, little nurse Lu Hui, under heaven's punishment. Ha! So exciting! No one is allowed to be distracted. The young nurse, Lu Hui, was like a demon that had turned into a little lecherous girl. She waved her claws and did not want to be outdone. She twisted her hips crazily and allowed the heavenly punishment to descend on her body. She melted Chen Hao's passion with 100,000 points and began the most primitive and craziest throb of a human being. Even Chen Hao couldn't help but snort. He had to admit that even if Lu Hui had nothing, her surging passion was enough to make any man fall for her. That was definitely not an act. Instead, it came from the depths of her heart, from the source of her soul. Chen Hao did not know how Lu Hui did it. At the very least, it was impossible for him to do it. This feeling was like Lu Hui's love for him had been accumulated over thousands of lifetimes. Every time, it was a lifetime of love that bloomed. More and more terrifying lightning swept through heaven and earth, and the entire Hongmeng realm began to tremor. It was as if the gates of the 9 heavens and 10 earths had been opened. All of the women seemed to see shadows of majestic immortal palaces, countless materialized deities, and countless flying treasures. They formed tangible attacks that rained down incessantly. This was the combination of Chen Hao and Lu Hui's heaven's punishment. As their souls and bodies merged, they triggered a heaven's punishment of a major cultivation level. Rumble. After an indeterminate period of time, a bolt of apocalyptic lightning suddenly exploded. It was tens of thousands of kilometers in radius and came crashing down. Chen Hao and Lu Hui could clearly sense that this was the final bolt of heaven's punishment, and they reached the peak of their passion. At the same time, the Grand Mist Supremacy Realm was formed. Boom! At this moment, the embryonic form of Chen Hao's great world in his mind began to transform into a real great world in his mind. Regardless of whether it was the Tao manifestation immortal fruit tree, the tree of life, the spirit spring sea, the endless immortal qi, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, or the Tao laws that filled Chen Hao's great world in his mind, they all began to undergo shocking changes. Terrifying heaven and earth shook, and the endless Tao laws collapsed and reformed. New, stronger, and more complete substance chains were formed. Heaven and earth, yin and yang, the 5 elements, time, space. All the laws of the greater world were formed in Chen Hao's great world in his mind. What was even more terrifying was the size of the space. At this moment, it was expanding at an unbelievable speed. Even countless stars began to form, forming galaxies and galaxies. After reaching the peak, Chen Hao's mind returned to normal. At this moment, he was so shocked that his mouth was agape. Was this really his great world in his mind? Chen Hao was also in disbelief. This also made Chen Hao even more certain that he was the reincarnation of a super-powerful existence. Otherwise, his great world in his mind would not have undergone such a terrifying upgrade. This was not a great world in his mind, but a real greater world. Moreover, it had just taken shape, but it was already unbelievably powerful. Chen Hao was certain that in time, it would be extremely easy to surpass the chaotic greater world. Just as Chen Hao thought that the changes in his mind had ended and that the Milky Way tunnel in the Hongmeng domain was about to appear, his great world in his mind changed again. With the Tao manifestation immortal fruit tree and the tree of life as the core and the spirit spring sea as the boundary, it suddenly rose from the ground and forcibly pulled out of the original world. Above it, the 9 heavens imperial court was formed and separated, forming a world of its own. Immortal world mode? Chen Hao was a little dumbfounded. Although he did not know how the immortal world and the greater world were connected, at this moment, when he saw the changes in his mind, Chen Hao immediately thought of the relationship between the immortal world and the greater world. How could he not be surprised? At this moment, a Milky Way tunnel that connected the 9 heavens and 10 lands suddenly descended from the sky and enveloped Chen Hao and Lu Hui. How? Whoosh whoosh whoosh, one by one, figures quickly approached Chen Hao. Hellion Wuzi, in particular, was giving it her all. No one knew how terrified she was at this moment. Quick, quick! What made the girls even more puzzled was that Hellion Wuzi was still urging them. Weren't they going to be the first to advance to the Supreme of Hongmeng, step into the Milky Way tunnel and return to the chaotic greater world first? They were almost done with the tempering and could trigger the divine punishment at any time. It would not be long before they could leave. Why did it seem like they were going to be separated forever? At this moment, Chen Hao, who did not feel anything at first, suddenly looked extremely shocked when the Milky Way tunnel enveloped him. Wait for my return. In just an instant, before Chen Hao could do anything, he and Lu Hui were pulled into the Star River tunnel by a terrifying force. Chen Hao had only sent out a wisp of his divine sense. Chen Hao and Lu Hui looked at each other in shock. What we saw before was the future. Chapter 1510. In the future, Chen Hao and Lu Hui had once experienced an illusion when their souls were intertwined. At that time, they had seen the moon and earth. At that time, Chen Hao had thought that Lu Hui was the reincarnation of a mighty figure on the moon or earth. Now, even though the scene they saw before did not appear, Chen Hao and Lu Hui knew that what they saw before was what they were about to experience now. Because there was only one aura in the Milky Way tunnel at this moment, Earth. It was exactly the same feeling as before. Therefore, even Lu Hui thought of this at the first moment, let alone Chen Hao who came from Earth. How could this be? After the Hongmeng domain advanced to the Hongmeng domain, they would be teleported away by the Milky Way tunnel. However, under normal circumstances, they had a choice. One was to be teleported back to the greater thousand world of the Hongmeng domain, or the other was to be teleported to the great world of Xiandi, which was open to all greater thousand worlds. Logically speaking, Chen Hao should have been able to choose between the immortal emperor and ancient chaos. However, after going through the heavenly punishment with Lu Hui, he had no choice at all. They were directly teleported to Earth, which they thought could only be reached after advancing to the immortal emperor and stepping into the immortal world. It's so strange, Brother Hao, what's going on? Could it be caused by our actions? It shouldn't be, we just did what we should do. Lu Hui hugged Chen Hao's arm and looked at the Milky Way tunnel in confusion. Something's wrong. Chen Hao frowned slightly. What's wrong, Brother Hao? The old god is gone. Ah. It must have something to do with this guy. Yes, it must be him, Chen Hao said with great certainty. Returning to Earth was something that Chen Hao did not even dare to think about, unless he encountered the immortal boundary stone again. He knew from Yang Luyan that even with the Empyrean Godhead's ability to travel through space, it would take a long time to return to Earth. Advancing to the immortal emperor and stepping into the immortal world was the best way. But now, after advancing to the Hongmeng domain, he actually stepped into the ancient Milky Way tunnel to return to Earth. Other than the old god or, in his mind, who else could it be? After all, it was because of it that Chen Hao was able to come to the boundless star of the ancient chaos. Although, at first, Chen Hao thought it was Yi Xian. The mysterious domain in my mind's the old god's protector? Don't ask, I only know this much. Everything is a mystery, including Yi Xian. Chen Hao muttered. Although Yi Xian had disappeared in the ancient chaos and entered Earth, she was only a powerhouse in the Daluo Golden Wonderland. But as his strength increased and his knowledge increased, Chen Hao felt that Yi Xian was not as simple as she seemed. Everything about him revolved around her. Long Ting, Yi Lan, Prince Ying, Ancient Chaos, the Immortal Emperor. From the beginning to the end, they had never completely escaped from Yi Xian's shadow. Right now, Chen Hao had just stepped into the Grand Mist Supremacy realm, and the great world in his mind had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. Yet he was forcefully returned to Earth. This made Chen Hao feel as though he was being manipulated by a giant hand. Was it in his mind or Yi Xian? What was the relationship between Yi Xian and it? Was Yi Xian controlling it or was it controlling Yi Xian? Chen Hao could not figure it out at all. The only thing he could do was to take one step at a time. Oh! Lu Hui responded and did not ask any more questions. There was not much worry or sadness on her face. On the contrary, there was a hint of smugness on her face. She had killed the outstanding women and obtained the opportunity to meet Chen Hao alone. It was destined to be for a long time. How could she not be happy? Cultivate. It won't be easy for us to return to Earth, Chen Hao said in a deep voice. He held Lu Hui's hand and a light flashed between his eyebrows. He and Lu Hui disappeared at the same time. Only a faint golden light spot floated in place, moving forward with the transmission of the Milky Way tunnel. At this moment, Chen Hao took Lu Hui and entered the great world in his mind for the first time. Ah! The moment they entered, Lu Hui exclaimed. As the spirit of all things, how sensitive were her senses. Brother Hao, is this really the great world in your mind? I feel that this is a real greater world. The laws of heaven and earth and the substance chains are very strong. They don't seem to be lower than ancient chaos. At least it's mine for the time being. Chen Hao, who was also sensing the great world in his mind, said softly. Even he himself did not know what it meant to return to earth this time. He did not know if such a change in his great world in his mind was related to in his mind. Or fundamentally, it did not belong to him. Everything was unknown. Brother Hao, Chen Hao's words and expression made Lu Hui feel his helplessness and depression. However, Lu Hui did not know what to say. Who could be sure that such a mysterious existence had nothing to do with it? It's okay. Don't worry. When the boat comes to the bridge, it will cross the bridge. When the car comes to the mountain, there will be a way. Cultivate. I will enter the immortal world space and try. Okay. Only the gains and insights from cultivation were the most certain and truly belonged to him. No matter what he was about to face, it was useless to worry. He could only face it bravely. Stepping into the Grand Mist Supremacy realm, Chen Hao needed some time to let himself advance in the immortal world space. At the same time, he could also send messages to the girls in the immortal world space. Chen Hao was sure of this. Wait for him to come back. What do you mean? The girls looked at the others in confusion. They were puzzled by Chen Hao's hasty voice transmission. Could it be that there is a problem with the galaxy tunnel? The girls thought to themselves. After passing the heavenly punishment and advancing to the supremacy of Hongmeng, the galaxy tunnel appeared and sucked them in. All of this was the most natural thing and expected. However, Chen Hao's hasty message meant that something unusual must have happened. Little Wu, you know, don't you? Chen Shui immediately looked at Helian Wuzi, whose face was full of tears. She had rushed over frantically but still did not make it in time. I thought I would be the one to leave. I didn't expect it to be him. What do you mean? The girls were stunned. They did not understand the specific meaning of Helian Wuzi's words. Helian Wuzi told the girls about her previous hunch and guess. Only then did the girls understand what was going on. This also made them fall silent. Helian Wuzi was an existence that had experienced endless reincarnation. Her perception naturally could not be groundless. And now, Chen Hao's hasty departure proved Helian Wuzi's hunch. They were separated from Chen Hao again. I'm almost done with the tempering. I'll trigger the heavenly punishment first. Chen Shui said. Let's do it together. We should be able to contact Brother Hao in the immortal world space. We have to get out first. I'm done too. Is there anyone else who is not done? Everyone is done. But let's split up, in case the heavenly punishment is too strong. The girls did not delay and began to trigger the heavenly punishment. Chapter 1511. In fact, they had already reached their limit when Chen Hao had finished tempering them. The only reason they had stayed here was to wait for the others to finish. Therefore, they were not in a hurry to trigger the heavenly punishment. Moreover, after stepping into the Hongmeng domain, Chen Hao had gone against his principle of, don't attack unless you attack me. He had taken the initiative to provoke the spirits of all living things in the Hongmeng domain. In just 100 years, he had swept through the Hongmeng domain. All the spirits of all living things that had stepped into the Hongmeng domain were either killed or had their souls planted with seeds of faith by Chen Hao and pledged their allegiance to him. The women, Qing Yang, Ning Jing, Ao Qian, Ling Feng, and the others had all obtained godheads that had been tempered by Chen Hao. Everyone's strength had improved tremendously. Chen Hao had originally planned to give Qin Nan, Pan Long, and the others the godheads he had tempered after leaving this place. Unfortunately, there had been a change before he could do so. Crack, heaven and earth shook, tribulation clouds formed, and the heavenly punishment descended. The women triggered the heavenly punishment one by one. The Milky Way tunnel descended and they returned to the chaotic universe. Earth, Earth. We're going to Earth. They had eagerly entered the immortal realm space. As expected, they had received news that Qin Hao had returned to Earth. There was no doubt that this was a shocking piece of news. After a brief silence, their fighting spirit was reignited. Everyone knew that Qin Hao would leave this time. When they met again, it would be countless times longer than before. It would take at least tens of thousands of years. The most likely scenario was that they would meet again on the path to becoming an immortal emperor. This meant that they would have to at least ascend to the seventh heaven of the Cutting Dao true immortal realm and embark on the path to becoming an immortal emperor. The road ahead was long, and they could only cultivate. Fortunately, they could still communicate through the immortal realm space, so they were not completely isolated. Phew! 3,000 years, but it's only a moment. In the immortal realm space, Qin Hao, who was in the greater thousand world on Earth, opened a cave abode on a towering mountain peak. Surrounded by endless Dao laws and immortal light, he slowly opened his eyes. His aura had already risen to that of the Grand Mist Supremacy realm. The Yin and Yang deities indeed promote and restrict each other. When the Yang deity steps into the Supreme of Hongmeng, the hidden deity only needs to meditate to achieve it. However, after reaching the balance of Yin and Yang, the progress will slow down. However, the time spent is nothing to me. It seems that although the macro world in my mind is abnormal, it still can't compare with the spatial laws of the immortal realm. To be exact, they are not on the same level. This is a little strange. The macro world in Qin Hao's mind already had all the features of a real vast thousand worlds, and it even had a small immortal realm. According to the memories he had obtained from the many godheads, Qin Hao knew that even if the space in his mind was not as big as the immortal realm, the gap would not be too big. Moreover, with the passage of time and the improvement of his realm, Qin Hao believed that the small immortal realm in his mind would one day grow into a real immortal realm. However, the space-time laws of the immortal realm were still 100 times that of the macro world in his mind. It was no different from the great world of Xiandi and the ancient chaos vast thousand worlds. This was enough to show that for the immortal realm, Qin Hao's macro world in his mind, the ancient chaos vast thousand worlds, and the great world of Xiandi were no different. It was only because its realm completely surpassed theirs that it could achieve the equal space-time law multiplication. The space-time laws of Qin Hao's macro world in his mind were more than 100,000 times that of the great world of Xiandi. After Qin Hao stepped into the Grand Mist Supremacy realm, the space-time laws had increased from more than 30,000 times to more than 100,000 times. The space in the immortal realm was also 100 times that of Qin Hao's macro world in his mind. This meant that Qin Hao had cultivated in the immortal realm for 3,000 years, but in reality, only about a day had passed. Ding! Suddenly, a crisp notification sounded in Qin Hao's mind. Qin Hao, your concept of relative time is wrong. Yang Liuyan's emotionless voice rang out. Wrong? Qin Hao was not surprised at all. Obviously, he was used to Yang Lin taking the initiative to remind him. Whether you're in the great world of Xiandi, the ancient chaos vast thousand worlds, or the vast thousand worlds in your mind, the real time is based on the space you're in. In other words, in these 3,000 years, the immortal realm calculated that you've spent 3 years in the real world. In the real world, reaching the seventh heaven of Cutting Dao true immortal within 100,000 years is based on this calculation. Oh, if that's the case, then it doesn't matter. It's just a calculation. The real time I've spent in the ancient chaos vast thousand worlds is only a day, right? Yes. That's good. Thank you, Ying. Yes. Sensing that Yang Liuyan's divine sense had disappeared, Qin Hao's lips curled into a smile. He knew very well that this was a wisp of divine sense that Yang Liuyan had deliberately left for him. However, it did not have all of Yang Liuyan's consciousness. It was just following Yang Liuyan's settings and carrying out the task mechanically. However, this was Yang Liuyan's divine sense after all. After Qin Hao's vast thousand worlds in his mind had been completely formed, He had a new understanding of life. Coupled with his previous scientific research and the experience of the birth of little wisdom, spiritual intelligence, Chen Hao was confident that he could cultivate it. Now, her gratitude for his nonsense and her response of yes was an obvious improvement. Now it seems that it is indeed as Yang Luyen said. The spirits of all things in the vast thousand worlds on earth were born earlier, and it is much stronger than the ancient chaos vast thousand worlds and the great world of Xiandi. It is more suitable for me. I hope it won't affect me much. Before returning to Earth, I have to reach the peak of the Grand Mist Supremacy Realm. This time, I'll take the lead with the Yin God. However, I have to refine Su Junfeng and Su Wenxing's divinity first. Chen Hao had previously suppressed Su Junfeng and Su Wenxing's divinity with the help of the old god. Now that he had stepped into the Grand Mist Supremacy Realm, although he had lost the old god, he still had the confidence to refine Su Junfeng and Su Wenxing's divinity. Needless to say, Su Wenxing was an existence second only to the Celestial Arch. Although Su Junfeng's strength was not as strong as Su Wenxing's, Chen Hao could feel that Su Junfeng's divinity seemed to have a stronger protection. It was definitely more difficult to refine than Su Wenxing's divinity. Su Junfeng's protection seems to be the Celestial Thearcha's protection. There is no other possibility. Perhaps this guy is a direct descendant of the Celestial Arch? That's possible. Chen Hao did not think that he was the reincarnation of the Celestial Arch. Although Su Wenxing's speculation was reasonable, Chen Hao himself knew that the flower of 7 emotions and 6 desires was indeed a unique skill that he had comprehended in battle. Moreover, it was based on the Red Dust Heart Sutra and not an inherited unique skill. It doesn't matter. I'll refine it first. Chen Hao urged his mind and began to refine it. Chapter 1512. The blue planet slowly rotated in an unchanging pattern, day after day, year after year. Compared to the countless planets, it was very small. It was so small that the cultivators of the Daluo Golden Wonderland could destroy it thousands of times with a casual punch, fly around it countless times in a breath, and explore every corner of it with a single thought. But this was only relative to its size. Once a cultivator approached it within a certain range, he would find that the energy of heaven and earth was suddenly sucked out, and it would become in existence like a silent space. What was more frightening was that no matter how strong one's cultivation was, or how profound one's understanding of the laws of heaven and earth was, once one stepped on its surface, everything would be out of one's control. One's vital essence would be suppressed thousands of times, one's supernatural power would lose its effect, and one's perception would be restricted thousands of times. The restriction of the laws of heaven. Unless one's understanding of the laws of heaven and earth had surpassed its supreme laws, one would not be able to break its shackles. Since ancient times, countless powerful people had originated from this small planet. Over the years, even if the creatures living on it had become ordinary people, they had also lost their ancient cultivation heritage and developed towards technology. To a real cultivator, they were nothing but ants. But so far, no one from outer space had been able to control it or destroy it. In ancient legends, it was the first heaven and earth to be born in the endless galaxy. In ancient times, it had a name, Planet Shun. Now it had a new name, Earth. Nowadays, people on Earth were equipped with technology, and there were no more miracles. Those myths and legends left behind, in the minds of most people, were just myths made up by novelists. Even if there were miraculous phenomena, they would be misinterpreted by some ridiculous so-called scientists, such as waterspouts, tornadoes, air pressure differences, and so on. It was the biggest joke in the world. A small number of people still persisted in their beliefs, whether it was bystanders or believers themselves. Perhaps more of them were looking for spiritual sustenance. Did immortals, gods, and Buddhas really exist? This might be the question in the hearts of every person on Earth. The unearthed ancient sword, buried underground for thousands of years, was still very sharp. When the sword was unsheathed, it shone with cold light, without any rust. The blade was thin and sharp, and it cut through more than 20 layers of paper. After thousands of years, why did it not rust? Even the modern lathe technology could not achieve this casting process. Of course, it couldn't be realized because it wasn't a product of technology. This was just one of the situations that science on Earth could not explain. There were more discoveries that surpassed the knowledge of humans on Earth, such as craniotomy from tens of thousands of years ago on Earth, wonderful but accurate ancient maps, countless metal smelting techniques of unknown origins, and all kinds of knowledge. In the age of impossibility, something happened that science thought was impossible. How could it be explained by so-called science? The birth and brilliant achievements of the mad scientist Li Yuan had, to a certain extent, changed the perception of the people on Earth. Even though he had been gone for nearly 100 years due to an accident in an experiment, his influence still spread to every corner of the Earth, especially in China. In almost every domain, there was a statue to commemorate him. He was a great man. Since ancient times, he was the only great man who could be revered by every country and every race in the world. He was the pioneer of a new era on Earth. He was a new legend. Because of Li Yuan's late theory, the current Earth began to pay attention to life science and vigorously research the stimulation and training of human potential. Some ancient books that were unearthed, some cultivation methods that were once abandoned by the world, especially the ancient martial arts of Huaxia, Taoist cultivation methods, and Buddhist cultivation methods, began to become popular. What surprised the world was that there was actually an improvement. Even though it could be said that only 1 in 10,000 people could achieve it, it proved that these pseudoscience, which was previously regarded as dregs, really existed and had great power. The human will exists and can produce power. Just like radio signals and other signals, who could detect its existence in ancient times. The definition of science was broadened. A resplendent ray of light suddenly appeared in space. Soon after, a figure appeared under the vast starry sky. Soon after, a ray of light flashed between the eyebrows of the figure and a graceful figure appeared. The moon Earth. I'm back. I didn't expect that I would really come back, and now. Chen Hao stared at the moon and the blue earth that were slowly growing larger in his eyes. Even though his state of mind had reached an extremely high level, at this moment, his emotions were fluctuating. In his previous life, he was a cold orphan with no family, love, or even friendship. He had always thought that his feelings for Earth were just that. However, when he really came back, he had to admit that this was his first home after all. The hometowns of Huaxia were very complicated, and the mad scientist Li Yuan was no exception. This is the moon and Earth? Brother Hao, at this moment, is this what we have seen before? The spiritual energy of heaven and earth is so weak, and it's rapidly decreasing. Brother Hao, I have a feeling that I'm going to be sealed. Lu Hui, who was snuggling up to Chen Hao like a little bird, looked at the scene in front of her and sensed the aura around her as she spoke softly. Her voice was also excited. However, there was a trace of worry in her voice. It was as if a big hand had appeared in the dark, and she felt a great pressure on her soul. Seal? Is there? Chen Hao was slightly surprised and asked in return. You don't feel it? No, it's just that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is rapidly decreasing. Chen Hao said truthfully. He did not feel that he was being sealed, and similarly, he did not notice anything unusual. Strange, I feel that this should be the suppression of the heavenly axiom. Could it be that it only affects outsiders? You're an earthling, so you won't be affected? Lu Hui asked. Chen Hao pondered for a moment, but he did not know what was going on. Logically speaking, if there was a special situation, Yang Lin should have mentioned it to him, but she did not. Earth is a magical planet, and the moon is not simple either. I don't know either. Let's wait and see, Chen Hao said. At that moment, the two of them had just ejected themselves from the Milky Way tunnel. Their inertia meant that they were rapidly approaching the moon. The starry sky was beautiful, and it was the future that he and Lu Hui had seen. This made Chen Hao feel that the moon was the gateway to Earth. Oh, is there really Chang on the moon? Hee, now we can see for ourselves. You even suspected that I was her reincarnation. The young nurse, Lu Hui, laughed. At that moment, she had obtained the memories of Earth from Chen Hao, and she was very familiar with the situation on Earth. Chapter 1513. It's not just my initial suspicion. What do you mean? Brother Hao, don't tell me you're still suspicious? The past, present, and future are all contained in cause and effect. Since we saw the future scene related to the moon and Earth, how can we completely deny that you have nothing to do with the moon? After all, what we saw back then was the dark side of the moon, so it can't be my past. It can only be the future that one of us, or both of us, triggered at the same time. Even Li Yuan had never seen the dark side of the moon. He only knew about it from satellite pictures. Why was the dark side of the moon densely packed with craters, but the front was as flat as a mirror? Why were the craters of the same depth regardless of their size? The sun's gravitational force on the moon was 254 times that of Earth's, but why was the moon still orbiting Earth obediently and becoming Earth's satellite? As Earth's satellite, the moon was so far away that it had to be captured by Earth. However, it was surprisingly large, and it was orbiting Earth in a circular orbit. That was too unimaginable. Unless the moon was voluntarily captured by Earth, it was impossible. Looking at the moon from Earth, it looked about the same size as the sun, but in reality, the difference between the two was huge. The reason for this illusion was the strange arrangement of the distance. No matter how big the craters on the dark side of the moon were, their depth was almost the same. Most of them were between 4 to 6 kilometers. Some craters were more than 160 kilometers in diameter, but their depth was only 2 to 3 kilometers, almost the same as a crater about 10 kilometers in diameter. Why was that? Could it be that the meteorites that hit the moon had the same force regardless of their size? But that was impossible in nature. So-called science could not explain the moon's existence from its natural state. In the past, Li Yuan could not explain it either. The only reasonable guess back then was that the moon was an alien spacecraft. That was the only way to explain many of the above problems. However, Chen Hao could think of countless possibilities now. For example, the moon was condensed by a powerful protective barrier, so no matter how powerful the meteorites were, they could only leave marks on the surface. As for why it was orbiting Earth obediently, it was a protective barrier refined by a powerful person for Earth, and so on. It was much simpler to explain it with the law of magic. The current Chen Hao was no longer the same person as before. So-called science was just a shackle of thought. You have a point, but my intuition is wrong. Really? You don't feel anything? Chen Hao asked. Under normal circumstances, if Lu Hui was related to the moon, then as we approached the moon, we would more or less feel something. For example, when we saw a stranger for the first time, we would feel as if we had seen that stranger before. When we arrived at a certain place for the first time, we would feel as if we had been there before. When we did something with someone, we would feel as if we had been there before, and so on. Sometimes, this déjà vu feeling wasn't an illusion from our memories. It was an awakening from our previous lives and the influence of karma. If Lu Hui really didn't feel anything, then it might really have nothing to do with the moon. No, Lu Hui answered affirmatively. Then it really doesn't matter. This is a bit strange, seeing the future for no reason. Forget it, we're almost there. Brother Hao, I can't hold on much longer. Can't do it? Is the suppression that strong? Chen Hao was slightly surprised to see Lu Hui's aura rapidly weakening. However, he still did not show any reaction. That's strange. Try staying away from the moon. But. No, as expected. This means that under normal circumstances, cultivators who come from the Milky Way tunnel are usually suppressed and can only land on the moon. Maybe you're the only one who's suppressed. Are you like me? That's impossible. If that's the case, it's impossible for there to be no miracles on Earth for so many years. This means that maybe I'm special and not suppressed. Hug me, I can't do it anymore. When they were still 1,000 miles away from the surface of the moon, Lu Hui grabbed Chen Hao's arm tightly and said. At this moment, the suppression on her strength suddenly increased by more than 10,000 times. In an instant, She felt as if she had become a mortal and could no longer use any power. She could not even maintain the most basic balance of flight. She felt that if she fell freely, like this, she would probably be smashed to pieces. Chen Hao hugged Lu Hui's waist. With a thought, he turned into a stream of light and broke away from the drive of inertia. Like cotton fluttering in the wind, he gently landed on the bumpy surface of the moon. Immediately, Chen Hao disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he had already brought Lu Hui into a ring-shaped mountain. Lu Hui's face turned pale. What a strong shielding ability, what a strong Dao mark. Little Hui, you go in first, Chen Hao said in surprise. At the same time, he directly took Lu Hui into his mind world. Lu Hui, whose strength was almost completely suppressed, could not hold on for long under the pressure of the powerful Dao mark. No wonder I failed to explore this place back then. This is not something that mortals can sense. Such an ancient aura is still operating perfectly. It can even be self-sufficient in the energy of heaven and earth. It's really amazing. Chen Hao could not help but be shocked. When he was outside the ring-shaped mountain, although his abnormal perception ability had sensed the fluctuations of the divine ability law, he did not expect the Dao marks in these ring-shaped mountain to be so strong. Just by the aura, Chen Hao could be sure that these Dao marks had existed for an unimaginable long time. These are just a few Dao marks that were exposed after the impact of the meteorite destroyed the ground. This is 5,000 meters deep. My divine sense can only penetrate 10,000 meters. What a strong protection. Could this moon be Earth's protective magic treasure? Chen Hao thought to himself. Almost all the ring-shaped mountains were created by the impact of the meteorite, but no matter how big the diameter of the ring-shaped mountain was, their depth was about the same. Almost all of them were concentrated at a depth of 4,000 to 5,000 meters. There were almost none that exceeded 7,000 meters, not to mention 10,000 meters. Chen Hao's figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Immediately, his figure kept changing among the ring-shaped mountains. After continuously investigating 100 of them, Chen Hao stopped and said to himself, "Sure enough, the deeper it is, the stronger the Dao marks exposed. And the material on the moon's surface has a natural divine ability shielding effect." "You're wrong. It's not natural." "Who?" Chen Hao was shocked. "Who are you, sir? To be able to come here and not be suppressed by the heavenly Dao, you're the first person in 1,000 years. And you've just stepped into the ranks of Daluo Jingxian." He could only hear the voice but not see the person, and Chen Hao could not locate the source at all. "Daluo Jingxian? I'm clearly the Supreme of Hongmeng." Chen Hao was puzzled. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.